How did a single-race couple react when they delivered a mixed-race baby? I work for a mortgage company, and a prior customer came in to inquire about buying another home. I asked him why, and he replied that after his third deployment overseas, he came home to discover his wife had given birth to a black baby. They are both white. He said he tried to stay with her and work things out. Fast forward 2 years and he returns from his 5th deployment overseas, and she's given birth to another black baby from a man different than the father of the first one. And that time he told her to pound sand and got the F out of there. I worked at a urologist's office for a couple of years in college, where the main appointments for the day were men having a vasectomy. Well, one man came in raging furious because his wife was pregnant, yelling that he wanted his money back because the vasectomy didn't work. Though that can happen, the doctor examined him and concluded that the vasectomy did indeed work. Poor guy left the office so quickly and without a word. You still gotta give him props for going to that conclusion first. I knew one guy who did have a vasectomy fail, as in grew back together. A couple of years after the operation, he almost got divorced because he accused his wife of cheating before he checked with the doctor and found out that his vasectomy had reversed. Oh, this story is too funny not to tell again. They handed my dad a black baby boy when I was born. I was born December 31st during a snowstorm, and needless to say, there wasn't much of a staff, it being a holiday and with terrible weather. I guess things got crazy because after I was born, they took me to clean me off and then handed my dad a little black baby. Needless to say, he was confused. He said there was some cussing before things were figured out. Apparently there was a moment of panic even though he knew the baby was a boy when it was meant to be a girl. Luckily, I was the only little white girl born on that night, so they knew which baby belonged to them and fixed that mess up pretty quickly. I knew a guy in the small town that I grew up in. He was the token white rapper of our group. Not that that's important, it's just funny. Well, he was dating a girl for a really long time. She was also white. She got pregnant. Well, the whole time he had told everyone he was going to be a father, his family, friends, everyone. His family had bought the child clothes and baby beds, and they'd even prepared a place at his mum's house to be the baby's nursery. Well, the day came and the baby popped out black. He claimed he took one look at the kid, turned and walked away, and refused to ever talk to her again. He refused to take her calls, dropped all of her stuff off at her house, and basically never saw her again. I can't imagine the embarrassment, the hurt, and how changed your life is after something like that. I mean, maybe he was just that good at rap. That is simultaneously hilarious and an awful undermining of this poor man's heartbreak. But thank you for making me laugh and guaranteeing my place in hell. I work as a biology professor, and I did Intro to Bio, where I had my students do traits. We're talking about widow's peak, hitchhiker's thumb, stuff like that. So this girl in my class finds out that mum and dad both have 2 recessive traits, and she is dominant for those traits. It was the first time mum had told anyone that dad could have possibly not been their dad. Daughter was 19 and didn't see how that went down, but it was really weird for the girl to describe how she found out her dad was not her dad. It took about 300 students for this to be brought to my attention. I don't do this lab anymore. In short, I outed a cheating mum with genetics homework. A white couple delivered an Asian. Twist, it turns out the father was secretly Asian. I was born 27 years ago to a very nice white couple. As the title of this video implies, I came out Asian. Right after the delivery, they take you out back and clean you up while your mum gets comfy in a regular hospital bed. During this little wait, my dad was seething, but he couldn't bring himself to accuse his fiancée of anything after the ordeal that she'd just gone through. So he resigned himself to be all smiles in the hospital, avoiding signing the birth certificate and to bring it up at home. Well, after waiting for an eternity in the hospital room, they bring me in and the doctor says, "I'm sorry, your son has jaundice." At which point my dad leapt into the air and thanked heaven that I was not Asian, I only had liver failure. I was born dark, brown eyes, black hair, and dark skin. Nurses raised a few eyebrows at dad, and when he left the room they pressed mum for the gossip on who the father was. Insisted they wouldn't tell, they just wanted to know. It was a very small country town. She had to show them photos of my equally dark grandparents to show them the coloring was just a throwback from her family. In a university lecture on basic genetics, to illustrate a point about recessive traits carried in certain chromosomes, the professor asked if any girls in the class were colorblind. One puts her hand up and he addresses her, "Now, I can say for a fact that your father is also colorblind, am I right?" No. The rest of the class got it about half a second before she did. I have a male relative that was cheated on by his wife, but it wasn't the baby's race that gave it away. To quote the baby's grandfather, the father of the cheated male, "Ain't no way he's one of our family. His Johnson is too big." Outside verification proved Grandpa correct. The cheated male did end up raising the kid as his own, though. My boyfriend is retired Army. He says there's a lot of cheating that goes on at the bases. Anyway, he told me about a friend of his that was expecting a baby and was in the room the whole delivery. When the baby came out a different color, the guy flew into a rage, and the docs and nurses had to pull him off her. When I gave birth to our middle son, my husband swore up and down that our child was mixed with another race and that the child was not his. I finally convinced him that he was insane, I've never cheated, would never cheat, and that yes, Caleb was his son. 5 years pass, we divorce, and he wants a DNA test. He gets one. Turns out Caleb is his son. Go figure, doofus. My mum's best friend, who's 60 years old, was recently contacted by a man claiming to be her half-brother. Her father had fought in Japan during World War II and had apparently had an affair with a Japanese woman and kept it secret even after he died. She was extremely skeptical, but her and her brother decided to meet this guy anyways. All skepticism went down the drain when her brother's Asian doppelganger walked through the door. My sister worked the OB-GYN. Woman comes in and gives birth to an Asian baby. She's white. Father's white but stupid. He comes in with his whole family, 1 white kid, 2 blackish kids. The nurse and my sister are waiting for him to explode or anything, but he just says, "Look at that, this one's Asian." The mother is looking at the nurses, silently pleading. The man turns to my sister and says, "Ain't life funny? God gave me a whole rainbow." Nurses, doctors, and staff are not allowed to say anything. A friend of mine's sister had a baby which turned out to be black. Boyfriend freaked out, called her every name in the book, and stormed off. When she finally convinced him to do a DNA test, it turns out that it actually was his child. Apparently, they have some distant relatives that it's happened to as well. Very awkward, but I'm pretty sure they ended up back together. I have a part of my family that the rest of the family tries to keep away. One cousin in particular really wants to be African American, even though my family, including him, are all very much white. He dated a real sleazeball of a white girl, and after a few months, she got pregnant. Fast forward 9 months later, and I received a phone call from my mum, dying with laughter, when my cousin's baby came out and was mixed, implying one thing and one thing only coming from 2 white parents. Well, my idiotic cousin thinks nothing of it, and is to this day, 5 years later, raising the kid as his own. It's a joke in the family now that having a mixed baby is a personal achievement of his. He acted black enough to make a mixed baby. Job well done, Derek. Am I the only one reading all of these stories and wondering about all the cases where the cheating was intra-racial and the dad never found out? My mum is a nurse in labor and delivery. She had a patient one time say if the baby was black, please put it up for adoption and tell the husband, who's not in the room, that the kid didn't make it. The baby ended up being white. Not sure what the staff would have done otherwise. There's a family in Kentucky that has a genetic disorder that makes some of them appear blue. One woman was so dark she was almost purple. It used to be incurable, although it didn't cause any problems other than blue-colored skin. But it no longer is, so people who have it take medicine and look normal. The family name is Fugate. Anyway, her baby was born in the hospital in Lexington, Kentucky in the 1970s and was dark blue. Freaked everyone in the family and on the hospital staff out, except the grandmother. She just laughed and said, "My mother was a Fugate," as though everyone would understand. Okay, and one quick Google later I can see that this is both true and one of the weirder quirks of genetics that I've ever seen. And unlike a lot of the others, it's not one that I've seen coming up much elsewhere in the world. We've not had many human smurfs here in Europe that I've ever heard of. Must be a 1,000,000,000 super recessive gene. I went to school with a kid who was born dark brown to 2 white parents. It's due to a skin pigmentation disorder, but the running joke in his family is that his mother was sleeping around. They all think it's incredibly funny. I'm impressed by their collective sense of humor, to be honest. My brother-in-law is half white, half black. My sister is white. They have 2 kids. One looks black and one looks white. They're always telling us about the weird looks they get when they go out. When someone does have the stones to ask, they almost never believe them when they tell them that they're both their biological kids. I have 2 sons. I'm their biological mum and they have the same father. I'm half white, half black, and their dad is half white, half Asian. One is tan, think Hispanic or Middle Eastern, with brown hair, brown wide eyes, and the other one is pale, jet black hair, and hazel Asian-looking eyes. The kicker is their dad is a fraternal twin. My oldest looks just like his dad, and like me, and the youngest looks like his dad's twin, and my father. Yeah, there's lots of what the frick when I take these kids out. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a cousin who has 2 white kids and 1 black kid. After many consultations and tests, the root cause of this condition was determined to be repeated consensual exposure to a black gentleman. Just wanted to add that her parents were, "I buy my uniforms at the white sale at Sears" kind of racist. They love the kid though. It made them rethink their position on race. Knew a guy whose fiancée cheated on him during their honeymoon. Anyway, kids were on the way and she ends up giving birth to triplets, all of them dark with afro hair. She and he were both white. Guy took it pretty hard, but he always wanted kids, so he put up with it, and eventually the witch left him for the guy she cheated with. He kept the kids, put them through school, loves them more than any father I've ever seen. They don't for a second think of anyone else as their dad. Well, a few years down the road, he started to have some mental issues, and well, long story short, he ended up fighting his split personality over a girl he was escorting in the witness protection program. The kids stole a helicopter and went to rescue him. What? Me, myself, and Irene. Well played, sir. My mum is a midwife and postnatal caretaker that witnessed this once. A woman was home birthing. She was a blonde lady with blue eyes, and her husband was blonde-haired and blue-eyed as well. She gave birth to a mixed-race baby and immediately tore down in cries and panic and pretty much confessed on the spot to what she had done. Husband stayed calm and composed, went outside, went to his lawyers to sort out the divorce, went to the housing agency to stop the rent, called a moving company to take all of his stuff out and basically dropped her from his life, and pretty much made her homeless in the process. She had to stay with friends afterwards. Now, imagine my mum is still caring for the woman and her child for about a week and sees all of this drama go down in front of her eyes. Apparently, the apartment was fully in the name of the husband and they had a strong prenup contract. She witnessed the house being emptied to the bare minimum, like bed, couch, dinner table, and some baby stuff, all without ever seeing the husband again. Mostly friends of the husband assisting him. Wife went into postnatal depression for quite some time. My mum checked up on her sometime later, about a year in. She does this as a standard because she cares. The woman had her child taken away because she couldn't care for it and was living in a women's community under supervision. And I would have done the same as the husband. Women, if you cheat, make sure not to mess up like that. And on that note, as a man, I would do a DNA test on the baby in the first week to determine paternity. I'm a bit of a butthole like that. My wife knows this fully, and I doubt she'll ever cross the path of her own destruction. Actually, that's not a bit of a butthole move, that's a huge butthole move. Someone trusts you enough to marry you and start a life with you, and you don't trust them not to cheat? One of the biggest butthole comments I've read on the internet in a while. Congratulations, jerk. I wasn't there at birth because I'm about the same age as the kids, but there were twins at the high school I went to that were gingers, and their parents were both black. Turns out they both carry recessive genes or something. The family picture is pretty funny because at first you see a jacked black man and a pretty fit black woman, and in front of them, 2 small ginger kids. A little off topic, but this reminds me of a small girl I recently saw, probably about 4, who was black but had the most gorgeous red curly hair. I'm talking like Christina Hendricks red. Even her eyelashes were bright red. She was incredible. Her parents were an average-looking black couple. I couldn't stop staring at how beautiful she was. I hope she grows up to be a model. Yes, I'm creepy. Moral of today's story? Only cheat on your husband with other guys of the same race. Then you're fine. This is unfortunately the advice my mother's given me and all my sisters. Okay, well today I learned your mother is a C-word. Most babies are red when they first come out. They don't really darken up until a day or 2 after if they're mixed white and black. My sister has a mixed daughter. We knew she was mixed, there was nothing surprising there. But she was just red until she actually brought her home 2 days later. For the record, having a baby that's a different race than the parents isn't always a sign of cheating. Black parents sometimes give birth to white babies, although the chances are kind of insane. So when I was in the 6th grade, my cousin was dating this guy, who we'll call Derp for the sake of the story. Anyway, my cousin and Derp got engaged, and my cousin was pregnant with his child. My cousin and Derp are both white. Anyway, fast forward 9 months, and they're having a get-together for the family to meet the new baby. I walk in and spot this dark-skinned little baby. Not just a little dark, mind you, this baby is black, as in not white. I'm kinda confused because everyone seems to not give an F about this. Mind you, I had zero racist thoughts, as a black baby is just as good as a white baby in my book. I just thought it was weird that no one was acting awkward towards my cousin for her obvious infidelity. So I go and whisper in my mum's ear, "Mom, why is that baby black? Did my cousin cheat on Derp?" And that's when I got the bombshell. Derp was black, except he was albino. I'd never even considered such a thing. So it was his child after all. My family still laughs about the story sometimes. In short, my cousin gave birth to a black baby. I thought she'd cheated on her fiancé, and turns out he was an albino black man. Well, you were quite young. From the limited sample of albino black guys I've seen, I'd say that most people would have worked it out past a certain age. Good thing you whispered and didn't yell. The most common answer, from what I can tell, is that a baby of different race than the parents isn't always a sign of cheating, as it's entirely possible for two faithful same-race parents to give birth to a child of a different race than the parents appear to be. Aside from that, the surprising few amount of comments indicating that a birth had actually been the result of an unfaithful wife result in a huge amount of drama. I remember reading many where the guy simply raised the child as his own. However, there are always a few gems, it seems, true stories or not, where hilarity ensues. A semi-related story from an acquaintance in med school. Laboring mother only speaks Spanish. Overconfident resident claims, "I speak Spanish," and begins talking to her in barely passable Spanish. A few minutes later, he starts telling her to push, but instead of empuje, he starts yelling, "Puta, puta," which is Spanish for working girl. Lots of tears came out, and then a baby. The first thing I thought of when reading this was King of the Hill and the whole thing with Joseph and John Redcorn. I heard this one from a friend. Her friend was born white and both of her parents are black. Father stormed off and left, accusing the mother of cheating. Never returned back. She was an albino. Very white cousin's girlfriend gave birth to a black baby while they were dating. Big surprise to him because they hadn't even slept together yet. He noped out of there real quick. Reminds me of the time a panda bear almost escaped from its habitat at a zoo I went to the other day. Everyone had to evacuate the zoo in case other animals got out, and zookeepers rushed to get the panda to safety. It almost started eating left-behind food, which would have been disastrous. All animals and people were okay in the end, though. What the frick? I have a friend who's black, but both of his parents are white. I always assumed he was adopted, but the story is much better than that. Turns out they're his natural parents and no cheating happened. When he was born, his mum was as surprised as his dad was furious. He walked out in a rage, but his mum insisted on a paternity test to prove that she'd been faithful. Turns out he had a black ancestor on his mother's side, but she didn't know about it until she did some research. The black gene just decided to express itself. And he doesn't look white with dark skin, he looks really black, with a natural fro and everything. Any geneticists out there care to elaborate on how this could happen? It doesn't always mean cheating. If one of the parents is mixed but looks single race, then they might have a kid who looks different than they do. This is a cheating story, not a mixed-race baby story. I was working in the ER one day and we had this guy come in via ambulance with his girlfriend and her family. I checked them in, thought nothing of it. 20 minutes later, his wife and her family come in. First words when I hear that his wife wants to see him are, "Oh boy." The waiting room actually became akin to a war zone. We had our entire security staff in there to keep them apart after the first couple of fights broke out, and then the guy says that he wants his girlfriend with him and no one else. Needless to say, it was an entertaining day. My teacher read this over my shoulder and said, "Oh, of course they blame the wife. Why couldn't it have been the husband?" And she was dead serious too. Ugh, this woman's educating me. There was a white couple who already knew the child was going to be black, because the woman had been with a black man before they were dating. They were planning on making a big deal about it in front of the hospital staff as a practical joke. So recently single me goes to visit a good friend and his wife for a weekend of boozing and hanging out on the water and at the beach to get over the sadness of my being recently singled. Being the best of hosts, it turns out that this involved a little three-way fun with his very willing wife. So we carried on through the weekend, enjoying all manner of fun stuff together. Kept it wrapped up the whole time. I then get a message a week later from him indicating that they're expecting. Even though we played it safe, it was a tense 9 months to make sure the baby did not resemble me in any way. Unfortunately for all of us, it didn't. My buddy was in the military and his wife delivered their first child. The doctor ran a test on the baby to determine the baby's blood type. The baby's blood type came back and my friend double-checked his dog tags. He asked the doctor if it was possible that the child was his based on blood type. The doctor said no. He starts to fume and the wife gets upset. Then the doctor says, "Hold on," and retests my buddy's blood type. It was wrong on his dog tags. The docs say that error is extremely common. Good thing he never needed a transfusion. What was your "I don't get paid enough for this" moment at work? When I worked at McDonald's, I found out we didn't get paid for closing. We got paid until the store closed. So if it took us an extra hour or two to close, that was unpaid. I wish I knew what I know now, because that is an open and shut case, but at the time I was young and dumb. My first paycheck, I noticed I had a ton of missing hours. So when I asked my boss about it, she told me we only get paid until the store is closed. So that night, I walked out when the store closed. They tried to guilt me into staying because the other team members need me. Frick that. I don't work for free, sorry, especially when I'm already making minimum wage. No thanks, not gonna happen. A similar thing happened to me when I worked at Taco Bell when I was a teenager. During the first closing shift I was scheduled for, after I was done cleaning everything, I told the manager I was ready to clock out and go home. She told me that she still had at least an hour of paperwork left to do and needed me to stay while she did it, since there was a rule that no one could be in the store alone. But she told me to clock out. I laughed in her face and told her, "I clock out when I leave." She didn't make me clock out and never scheduled me to close again, so win-win for me. Used to work as a dental nurse. First patient of the frickin' day said he felt sick after having a local anesthetic. He looked sick too. I grabbed the bin and told him if he needed to vomit, take the bin. He held it in his lap and turned, vomiting down the side of the chair and all over my pants and shoes. Of course, I had to clean it up, and of course, they wouldn't let me go home to change. That's disgusting. Surely it's not ethical to let someone work with body fluid exposure on them the whole day. It's also a massive infection risk. When I walked into the room of a confused patient on blood thinners who had ripped out his IV and catheter and had crap and blood on every surface of his room, it looked like a murder zone had been committed. I've been through a lot as a nurse, but that was like going into war. I manage a fast food restaurant, and for me it's always things that have to do with the bathroom. From having to clean up adult magazines with splooge on the floor or walls to people either purposely crapping on the floor, even used hypodermic needles. Same boat here, but with customers instead of washrooms. Swearing at my underage staff puts a real bad taste in my mouth, and I am not nice about it. I don't miss either of these things. Good luck, everybody left in restaurant work. Hope all of your customers start watching The Bear and educating themselves on how hard you work. Psycho camp director lost her crap on all of the lifeguards because we said we weren't coming back next summer. Reality was we all had legit reasons. I was going to take summer courses to graduate early. Another guard was moving to university and was going to work in that city. Another guard got offered a head guard spot at a camp near her house, etc. Nothing that said we hated the current camp, just other things going on. We were told in a group meeting that if we weren't happy there, we could leave and she would find other guards. Following Friday, she calls us all in to tell us what a great job we're all doing and how happy everyone is going on the lake. Tuesday after that, she calls us in individually to tell us we aren't working hard enough and she sees us slacking off all the time. Lunchtime Tuesday, all of the guards walked into her office, told her to go frick herself in front of the owners of the camp, and we all piled into my Ford Focus and went out for beer. Went home that night to a message from the camp owner asking us to give him a call back. We'd all chatted and realized he'd called all of us. Called him the following day and told him what went down. He asked us to reconsider and that he would give us $5 an hour raise and report directly to him. We discussed it and agreed on the condition that Psycho Director apologized to us at a collective staff meeting. She refused and had a tantrum. Camp owner fired her on the spot, escorted her off the property, and we opened the lake back up. F you, Bob. I make $13 per hour on an ambulance. Every day is an "I don't get paid enough for this" moment. I was working late, like 2 a.m., in the office. My manager said, "Let's go to the convenience store to buy up some snacks and smokes." She sits in the back and we drive there. After we get our crap, she says, "Can we swing by this street intersection real quick?" When we get to that intersection, I guess she sees a car that belongs to someone she knows, parked in front of her boyfriend's house. She starts to wail, cry, and kick around in the back seat, while my bewildered butt just holds the steering wheel with a stupid look on my face. After 20 minutes of that crap, we drive back to the office, I drop her off, and I go home. What the frick? So she sat in the back seat like you were a cab driver or something. She didn't want her boyfriend to see her up front, guarantee it. She suspected him and the whole plan was to check in a different car. Worked at a fast food place about 13 years ago. This lady in the drive-thru claimed she was missing a sandwich. Our policy was to ask for bags back to verify. I asked to see the bags, 3 or 4, decent-sized order, and instead of handing them back like a civilized human being, she instantly started raging and throwing the food into the window while cussing me out. Guess what one of the items that she threw at me was? Yup, it was the missing sandwich. Crappy people will always try to scam something. Well over 2 decades ago, I fielded a call from someone insisting they were missing an entire 10-pack of tacos on their 20-taco order. I had no problem telling them I'd been making food all day and no, an order like that had never come up on my screen and to try scamming some other restaurant. I get it here like that all the time. No, you don't. You know how I know that? Because I'm here all the time and I've never seen you before and I've never done it like that. I've seen lots of, I'm friends with the owner here, too. Well, I guess I have many friends here that I didn't even know about. Countless times at the go-kart place, summer job, where I work, I've had to put up with special needs kids whose caretakers or parents dropped them off and just drove because they wanted a break from them. These kids, and adults, have a mental age of anywhere from 3 to 15 and many times they are unable to follow the directions that we provide or even listen to us. They are not only a danger to themselves, but to the other riders and to us, the staff. An easy solution to this would be for their parents to ride with them in a double and to drive for them, allowing everyone to have fun without having to put anyone in danger. However, that costs money, and they don't want to. One parent even said, "Why can't you just ride with him?" And when asked if the kid would be comfortable with other people, she said he wasn't. I wanted to call her a crappy parent, but I didn't want to lose my job. We can't deny them as they have the physical age to ride, but are hopefully putting rules in place to require parents of children with special needs to ride with their parents. I held nothing against these kids, but the fact is that their parents are responsible for them. If they want a break from them, they could hire a caretaker. Even then, though, I understand that bad parents do exist. However, it is the caretakers who refuse to take care of the kids who are unacceptable. You are getting paid. Do your job. I hope you're calling the cops every time a disabled individual is dropped off without supervision. As someone who's worked with this population, this is dangerous for them and you. Got change thrown in my face at work because a man was upset we didn't have meatballs. Now if I'm working, he'll come in, see me, and walk out. I work at Subway. I work in childcare. There was one time we had one kid who had a diaper blowout, and one kid who spewed everywhere. There's only 2 teachers, so this one has to handle the blowout and one the vomit, while also keeping the rest of the kids away from it all. I work in childcare too. I was the only one watching a group of 14 4- and 5-year-olds. One of the 4-year-olds spewed, and I spent the next few minutes trying to keep the kids from dancing around the spew, while also trying to clean up the girl who spewed. Thankfully, another teacher came to help me out. I would like to clarify that 14 children is not a ratio violation in my state, Tennessee, US. The state allows a class of children who are ages of 4 and 5 to be at a ratio of 16 to 1. Is this an insane number? Sure. Is it a violation? No. This was in the late 90s. I was working at Walmart at my first job as a teenager. I was floated to the garden department one day and there was a guy looking at lawn fertilizer. I walked over and asked if he needed help. He said, "Not now, just looking at the different kinds you have." Pretty standard reply from the guy. So I said, "Okay, let me know." I walked away, and then swung back about 5 minutes later. Same guy has proceeded to rip open about 10 different kinds of fertilizer all over the ground and is rolling around in the stuff. He is also taste sampling. I call my manager because I didn't want to deal with it. Security escorted the guy out of the store and called an ambulance in case the ingestion of the fertilizer hurt him. My boss insisted that everybody be at their desks at 8:30 sharp. She made me take roll call on an attendance sheet and hand it in to her every day. She also made me do it at lunchtime when everybody left and came back, and when they left at night. Took roll for a bunch of adults 3 times a day. I don't work there anymore. In my various workplace complaint compilations I've done here over the past few months, there seem to be a couple of special workplaces that go completely fascist on their employees. They tend to have high turnovers, surprisingly. I had a company try to keep me once by offering me an entire grand more than I was taking at my new job. I told them how much it would take to keep me and that while still a raise, I'd be settling for a much smaller number at my new job. It also came with less stress, less management hell, and that I wouldn't be the sole person responsible for advising design, advising sales report, advising sales, advising project management, and advising on sites on how to do their jobs that they needed to do so I could do my one job. I laughed, hung up the phone, deleted all my scripts, and left. The guy that replaced me still asks me for help almost 3 years later now. I worked for the university's horse barn as a teenager. They had some pretty strict rules that I was not used to at other places. Like the horses were only allowed outside for 2 hours no matter what. Could be the most beautiful day and we would have to stop everything we were doing to bring them into their stalls. They were only ever allowed 2 squirts of fly spray which didn't cover their butts. Required to have their halters on 24/7 even in the stalls at night. Our boss clearly had zero experience with animals, or if he did, he just didn't care. One day, while one of the horses was having his feet trimmed, my boss went to pull out a weed whacker from the bottom of the shelf directly next to where the horse was standing. A lot like Jenga, the entire closet of machinery fell onto the horse, causing him to kick the farrier and run. Ever since that incident, the horse was a mess, so instead of hiring a trainer to fix the problem, they just locked him in the stall, all day 24/7. I quit shortly after that. I still wonder how that horse is doing. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked at a Toyota service department for a few months. It was terrible in general, but one day was the worst. During the week, I had a nail go straight through my foot, so I'm bandaged up and have to walk around to get everything. Probably 100 yards to the car wash, 40 yards to the shop, etc. My team for Saturday, 4 people, had one person quit on Wednesday and I had one person who had a funeral to leave early for. The other guy was new, so he was slow to get stuff done. My boss says he'll come in and help. Wednesday, we lock it at 60 appointments since we have short staff up front and back. We do take walk-ins too. Thursday, it's at 80 and we tell our boss to lock it. Again, on Friday, before closing, we see 110 appointments. He never locked it. Come Saturday morning, we had 130 appointments from 7 AM to 4 PM. I'm having to walk around a lot and ended up bleeding through 3 pairs of socks and bandages. I had to chase down about 80% of our customers' cars because our porters were goofing off. I had 53 opened tickets at 12 PM. We had a 4-hour wait for walk-ins and 2 with appointments. Haven't had lunch or a snack since they banned food and drinks at our desks. My friend is about to leave for the funeral, so I cover his work and my boss leaves for lunch, throwing his 20-ish tickets on my desk. So I'm 110 tickets deep now, helping the new guy with stuff, moving cars and trying not to pass out. Oh, did I mention 95 degrees Fahrenheit outside, no AC in our covered area, not inside, and 90% humidity? We didn't even get a breeze. Can't have snacks or drinks at our desk either. It gets to 3 PM and I'm rescheduling people, trying to get everyone out when their cars are done, but have to limp them down to pull them in front to leave after they pay. My boss still isn't back and the new guy quits. I end up getting in one car and blood from my sock drips onto our paper mats in the car. I cleaned everything out, vacuumed the car, washed it and pulled it up. Customer went ape crap that she saw blood on the disposable paper mat, about the wait, not getting a discount for her non-appointment service and demanded to speak to my manager. That was it. Called him up and sent to voicemail. I explained it to his mailbox, then called the GM to explain that I'd been alone for 3 hours dealing with an uncapped amount of customers. 5 technicians walked out, I'm still not recovered from my workplace injury, and that I'm finishing my paperwork to take my lunch break at 4 PM. Boss shows up when I'm about to leave to eat my lunch I bought, knowing their provided lunch would be gone before I could set foot in the break room. He told me that in our state I'm not legally allowed a lunch break during a shift, and I have to stay to finish out the customers on my tickets. I mentioned being here since 6 AM pre-printing everything, saying I just need to relax, and he said, "You didn't even clock in this morning, so unless you do what I say, you aren't getting paid." Service advisors are paid commission here and percentage of our parts profit for stuff sold. I don't even get 10 cents an hour. So I walked to my station, removed all of everyone's login copies of my permissions, deleted all of my notes, deleted all of my warranty macros, all the spreadsheets, and reset every custom line I added to our programs before I removed my admin permissions. Walked out and got a call when I got to my car asking, "Why isn't your login able to collect credit cards?" So he had to either write down credit card info, take cash or checks, or let them go. My GM asked me to come back at a pay raise and less hours, but I knew it was BS. My boss ended up getting let go in the following months since he couldn't get things back up to speed. My good friend moved to Mercedes parts, so he's happy. I ended up going to BMW for a bit after that and handled a few other franchises later. I worked IT with about 30 other developers and firefighters, supporting a large 3-shift-a-day manufacturing line. When the line computers went down, 300 workers leaned their backs against the wall, waiting for us to get the manufacturing process back up and running. We pretty much had freedom to stroll in at about 10 a.m. Many of us worked well into the evening, often took 2-hour lunch breaks. Most of us were on 24-hour call, which earned us half a day of comp time for any trip to the office, at any time of the day. A new boss was appointed over us. He quickly replaced our casual work hours with strict 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. hours, with a 1-hour break for lunch. Day 1 of his new policy, we were working on a failed mid-range computer on the manufacturing line. 300 workers hanging out watching us. Oops, it's 5 o'clock. Quitting time for us. New boss caught us in the parking lot just heading to the local bar and swiftly changed his new policy back to our standard. Reality sets in, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Take your pick. Our productivity and morale was through the roof with the old boss. He got promoted to corporate and company hired a new one. He goes through every single room at 8 a.m. sharp to check if people are working and if the guys that work outside the office already left. Same thing after lunch. Everyone is freaking miserable and performance went downhill. Worst thing is he micromanages the crap out of everything and it always has to be his way. It's a process that has been working and continuously improved, tested and proven to be completely efficient and give results we need? Yeah, forget about that. Let's do it his way because that's how he did it 20 years ago, even though he doesn't know how it works now. Team leaders, supervisors, engineers, nobody has a voice anymore. It hasn't been fun. I've repeatedly heard a saying that you should always give new management time to settle, even if their presence seems oppressive at the start. I guess this one is one of those cases where once you've seen what it's capable of, throw it out and start again. I walked into the bathroom and someone had smeared poop on literally every single surface, wall, everything, except one small part of the ceiling they couldn't reach. Poo-casso almost made me quit, but luckily my boss told me to lock it, not let anyone else use it, and he got someone to come in with a pressure washer. Pressure washer is a new level of poo smear cleaning. Love it! A few years into my flying career, so definitely not earning what people think pilots earn, I was asked to take a bunch of handicapped children and their carers for a 10-minute flight in a small twin-prop aircraft. All seemed to be going well until after landing when I smelt the unmistakable stench of spew. I looked around and all the passengers were looking horrified as the inside of the plane had been covered in what, I was told, used to be strawberry milkshake. I then had to vacuum and wash down the carpet in the plane. The vacuum died after picking up a large amount of this lumpy white substance and it started to drip back down the nozzle. It was a warm day and that didn't make the smell any better. I mentioned the handicapped thing not because I'm an awful person, but because his learning disability meant that he didn't think to inform his carer of his nausea, so there was no attempt to reach for the sick bag. We used to be paid half salary to attend seminars related to our industry that grant professional development hours. These seminars would often be at 7 a.m. at a hotel that was about a 2-hour drive for me, if I was lucky, in rush hour traffic to get to. But hey, it was paid and had free breakfast, so waking up at 4:30 to attend wasn't the worst thing in the world. The company announced that they believed attending the seminars was furthering our knowledge, therefore helping the company and therefore helping us, so we would no longer be paid to attend them, but we were still expected to go. I just said frick that and haven't attended a single one since then and delete all of the invite emails. I'm paid hourly, so taking the 6 hours out of my day to drive and attend a seminar I'm not being paid for is just plain stupid. I was asked why I haven't gone to any of them and told them I have a mortgage to pay. Haven't been asked to go again since. Direct support staff for people with minor disabilities, $13 an hour. Had a client go off the rails because he refused to take schizophrenia pills, was working night shifts and he gets up in the middle of the night and starts yelling random things, running around the house in the buck, peeing on everything, asking for me to put a cowboy hat on him, and he is now in a nursing home, bless his soul. Was making $2 above minimum wage for a furniture rental store. I was supposed to be a manager in training, but they screwed me and made me a jack of all trades. One day, they asked me to help out the repo runs and get back furniture from people that didn't pay. First red flag was going into an area and taking away a fridge from a family and watching them take all of their food out for their kids and getting friends to keep it cold. The nail in the coffin was going to someone's house at 10 p.m. at night, waking up the family, going into the bedroom of a sleeping child to wake him up so he can take away his bed as his parents didn't pay for it. As someone with young children at the time, I was disgusted in what I was doing. I was putting in 18-hour days doing these repossessions. I asked my district manager what I would be getting as compensation, as I've had to do some very terrible things. She promised I would be well compensated for saving the company a ton of money and product. I got a $15 gift card to buy alcohol. I don't drink. When my boss screamed at me for something they got wrong. This was a couple of hours after two co-workers almost came to blows because one of them left their phone overnight and the other, the first person to arrive in the shop, used it to send a prank text to another co-worker but didn't want to admit it. I work in security, and a bit under a year ago I worked at some kind of public TV event. My job was to keep people without passes out of a specific area which was intended for those working behind the scenes, to kick back, relax and get their lunches and all that. Anyway, the only ones I was allowed to give entrance to were people with passes and other security folks. But then, word from above came that the exception was to be made for some kind of supposedly famous child music group. I had no clue what they looked like, so 4 kids and their parents walk up, and I stop them. "Don't you know who they are?" Quickly followed, and eventually it got cleaned up. And every time they kept bringing in more friends and family members, and the same song and dance continued. I don't think you understand what a contract means. Besides, this is an opportunity for you. When the new manager tried to move me to night shifts, weekends, from my day shifts, workdays, despite my contract being very specific about when I worked. "Hey, you were right. This is a big opportunity for me," was how I opened when I told her I was quitting. The look of shock and 15 minutes of silence on her part were hilarious and the best feeling interval of my entire life when she realized I'd thrown her own stupid words back at her. What does your job ask you to hide from the customers? At the hotel I work at, if a guest found a stray bedbug, all staff were instructed to neither confirm nor deny that it was an actual bedbug. Word games were not fun. I experienced that firsthand. Went to a convention that was infested with cockroaches. Collected a few in a cup, went to the front desk to complain. They reassured me that what I saw was just harmless water bugs and there were no roaches anywhere in the hotel. None. Zero. Nada. Had to ask them if they'd be fine with me releasing these harmless bugs in the lobby. And the moment I said that, they froze and realized that there was nothing they could say or do. My last job was a white-labeled help desk. You had to hide the fact that your company existed at all from the customer. You had to pretend that you were from whatever company the customer was using for their IT. I worked for a monitoring center, and that's really what we did as well. Instead of saying this is avant-garde, we had to use the name of the company. We monitored for medical buttons like I've fallen and I can't get up, Alert 1, Response Link, Life Protect, EMC security companies, etc. Security systems for homes and businesses, and fire alarms. The thing that made it the most frustrating was when they were doing something wrong on their end and we couldn't just straight up tell them what was wrong. Like they would press their button to hang up, but it just calls us back again and we have to be like, "Okay, I'm going to disconnect, you don't have to do anything," while they are screaming that we keep calling them, when it would be so much easier to just say, "We can't call you, the only way we can get in contact with you is if you press your button, so stop pressing it unless it's an emergency." That company was awful to work for. As a tattoo artist, oftentimes apprentices at the end of their apprenticeships will start to tattoo paying customers, walk-ins, and for a few tattoo shops the apprenticeships are much shorter than they need to be. So if you're getting tattooed but someone seems to be young or they seem inexperienced, they probably are, and they're probably still in their apprenticeship, but the shop will tell you they're actual artists. Do your research when thinking about getting a tattoo, and don't be afraid to wait months or even years for the right artist for you. It'll save you from a really crappy tattoo. I think this might have happened to me. I went to a shop with a good idea of what I wanted and was prepared to wait to get it. Surprise to me when they said they'd get me in the same day. It looked fine that day and a few months after, but slowly became obvious they didn't go deep enough in some places and had shaky hands on others. Good news is, about 1.5 years after the initial tattoo, I went back to the shop and asked for the artist, who was still working there. He seemed embarrassed and touched it up with no charge. I tipped him good and it looks much better. Still love my tattoo. A year and a half in the trenches is a long time, especially if he's a naturally talented artist and just needed some time to pick up some tattoo-specific art knowledge and muscle memory. I can tell you he was real glad you came in and let him fix it up. MD in pathology. We're the ones who give bottom-line diagnoses and staging for most cancers and many other diseases. In a weird way, the patient isn't our customer, the doctor is. We're telling them what the diagnosis is and what evidence we have to support it. Anything we can say can trigger them to do a whole new treatment plan or a bunch more tests, so we have to be careful not to mention random things that we see unless we want them acting on it. For example, we might think, "These megakaryocytes are a little small and I see a few more of them bunched together here, but it's only in a couple of spots." If we bring it up, it might seem more significant than that, and trigger a distracting question about one disease process when we know that's not the actual problem. A big part of the training is learning how to communicate the truth without clouding it with more truth. Unfortunately, this often means that the reports are almost unintelligible to the patients because they're not the intended audience of the report, really. Put that down to a job I would never want to have responsibility for, either breaking people's hearts or giving them so much information that they don't realize they're in danger is pretty grim. No thank you. The restroom. I work at a small privately owned pet store. It's the most trashy store ever, and the bathroom is a room with a toilet, water heater, and buckets. To use it, you have to go through the back room, which is where we keep the rats and stuff. Basically, it's employees only. Well, one lady asked us to use the restroom, we let her, and she stole a turtle that was being soaked in the sink on her way out. We caught her stuffing it in her bra, but she got away. Now if a customer asks if we have a bathroom, I have to say no. You'd be amazed at how good construction workers become at hiding flaws. It's nearly a part of the job description and a large part of why so many construction efforts is put towards cosmetics, beyond the fact that most people just don't want to be looking at a bunch of rough-in work that's functionally the same but aesthetically atrocious. I concur. I was a finisher for some years, painting, staining, so in other words making your brand new piece of crap house that you paid way too much for look nice. Amazing how many homeowners get duped or just plainly have no idea what they're doing or agreeing to. I've worked at 2 fast food restaurants in my life. At each one, the only time that food safety protocol was followed or enforced was the day that the health inspector was coming in to grade us. I should also note that both stores received 100% every time the health inspector came. Obviously, every restaurant is different, it all comes down to management. The stores I worked at were all about getting food out the door as fast as possible, with the smallest number of people working as possible. That leads to cutting corners. Not all restaurants, even fast food, are like that though. My point in posting was that even though they appear clean or have a high score posted on their health inspection, that doesn't mean they're following all of the guidelines set in place for them. How many people are supposedly working on this really important project? Spoilers, it's just me. Client, can we add X? Me? No. Can we have a discussion on this with the whole team? You just did. We sell software and we have a page that has instructions on it for setting up Linux servers. But that's basically all we know about the OS and as much as any of us actually care to learn. If asked, the going policy is that our Linux specialist is out this week, but we'll totally refresh what we know by going over the page with you. Meanwhile, most of us Linux users are thinking, crap, they actually mentioned us. It does feel like the general principle of Linux is, if you can't work it out on your own, you don't deserve it. I recently just started working at a fairly fancy resort and we just finished renovating a floor of the hotel and a lot of the new furniture had Argentine cowhide as the leather for it. We were instructed to tell guests that it was a fake synthetic material just in case. I work at a deli and bakery currently. All of our food is from frozen and they want me to call it fresh, baked in store every day. Dude, it was frozen for 3 months, thawed for an hour and then cooked. It's no better than anything else you get from the freezer section, and in many cases, the freezer section is higher quality stuff. At BK, the food is frozen and gets warmed up in an automatic grill, and we're told to tell the customer that the meat is always fresh and there. The last time I ate at Burger King was about 4 to 5 years ago in a food court. I ordered a cheeseburger and watched as an employee literally pulled a burger out of a drawer and shoved it in the microwave. I don't know why, but I couldn't stop laughing to myself. Not now, but back when I worked as an aide at a nursing home, we were forbidden from telling patients that we were short-staffed. We were, and it was the fault of administration because they were trying to save money. But literally the residents would be yelling at us because their shower was late or whatever, and we were supposed to just act like it was because we were lazy. We weren't allowed to tell them it was because I had the entire wing by myself. The administrator was sick of having angry family members calling to complain and decided we should take the brunt of it instead. Have some of the same issues at my job. As a CNA, I'm able to explain to them that we're doing our best, and that I'm sorry for the delay, but on days where we're understaffed by more than 2 people, I tell them. There's no other way to get them to understand. But at my job, it's got the opposite effect. It makes the admin keep us properly staffed for the most part. Best of luck, being an aide is like no other job out there. I'm a pharmacist for a major chain. We were recently told this from our district manager because we kept getting reviews complaining about longer wait times and that we needed more help. Apparently telling patients that filling their scripts would take longer because I was the only one working that day is a big no-no. Cell phone store. Customers returned perfectly good phones all the time. We were told to sell the boxes as brand new, first-time activations and purposefully leave out the fact that they had in fact already been activated and taken home, within 48 hours. I'd be teed off if I brought a phone full price and it was even slightly used. I let those phones get dusty and would never sell them despite that crappy policy. I used to work at one too, and we also did that as well. I think the thing that annoyed me the most was the push to sell the accessories just because it was on a daily basis. I understand the need to sell accessories, but what I didn't understand was the need to sell accessories that do not fit the phones. Like, is it that hard to find accessories that actually fit the phones to their exact model? For example, if you wanted a screen protector, it was either going to fall short around the edges or be too big where we had to cut it so it would fit. It was worse for tempered glass because it was more expensive. I loathed every time I had to sell one. If I didn't, I'd get in trouble and get scolded for not hustling enough. I worked at a small town store, so I knew a good chunk of people and felt terrible selling them. I only sold them whenever managers were present, otherwise I'd just tell customers to order off of Amazon. Screw that place. I love that complete refusal to be a sleazy salesman. Although if someone has got to 2020 without realizing that everything is cheaper online, I feel like you might have just doomed them to a massive online shopping spree when they see the prices there. Our sales prices are just normal prices. Had to stock some pressure washers a few months back. They're $199 each when scanned. The next day I have to put up more, scan them, and they show up as $279 each. Couple of weeks later they're on sale for $199 each. Just to make things clear, they raise the price for a couple of weeks before putting them on sale. They don't just add a sale sticker to it. This isn't with everything that's on sale. Some things are on sale because it's literally just, oh crap, we have too many of these things and nowhere to put them. Or we have a ton of product related to the spring season and now spring is over. Those are actually at a discounted price. There's a guy locally who owns a furniture store and every one of his commercials ends with, "Come to so-and-so furniture where we don't mark it up just to mark it down and call it a sale." I didn't know that was a practice until his commercials started airing. How does that work out for him? Wasn't there a store that also tried to do this and lost lots of money because it turned out that customers love getting lied to? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Let's just say our technology doesn't come close to meeting its process guarantees, but we can give a customer a phone book-sized excuse of why it's their fault. I can't tell which of our vendors this is. Any. Literally any. Out of both healthcare facilities I've worked at, they both made a big deal about not expressing how short-handed we are to the patients. Same at mine. I told them anyway because they wouldn't risk firing a great employee when they're already short-staffed. Not in my current job, but when I worked in retail, we had to process waste food off the floor, waste food being fresh items that had been reduced on their use-by date and then wasted or removed from our stock level because the company didn't want customers to see how much food was wasted. It was a lot. We could process damaged items on floor or items that had been taken out of the fridges and dumped elsewhere by customers but not out-of-date or end-of-life products. We did trial giving our waste food to local homeless shelters, but head office stopped it because it wasn't viable, which I took to mean there wasn't any money in it for the head office. So I pushed them and they said that they were worried there might be lawsuits against the company for giving out-of-date food to people. We could accidentally poison someone, etc. I'm talking trolleys of food. Liquids were poured away and written off, food was placed in bin bags and thrown in huge bins around the back of the store that were locked to stop people digging through them. Some of my colleagues would pour bleach or industrial-strength floor cleaner over it too. I had a problem with wasting so much food and thought the excuses head office gave for not allowing us to donate was rubbish. It was all about bottom line for them. The company itself makes a lot of noise about how environmentally friendly and green they are and how much work they do for charity, when behind the scenes it wasn't like that at all. They had a really crappy attitude towards their staff in general too. I was glad to get out of there. Food retail is the worst retail sector to work in. Their reason for not donating is BS, at least in the US. There are laws to prevent companies from being sued over donated food. I'm a cashier and everyone needs to keep the override card over a mysterious button that is next to a till at customer service. It's attached to a big red light and has a wire connecting it to the phone. Nobody knows what it does and we don't want to find out. That sounds an awful lot like the 911 button that summons the police in case of robbery that many restaurants have. Restaurant employee here. Staff is almost always sick because we get in huge trouble if we take a sick day. Not uncommon to have servers or food expediters throwing up while at work. Strep throat, colds, other contagious diseases, illnesses are always going to show up around the workplace. Mice. We have mice. All my past food service jobs have had mice. Assume any restaurant you eat at has a mouse problem. Yep, I have pneumonia and was in the hospital for nearly a week. My store manager kept texting asking if I could come in every day. It's like, yeah, I can't breathe, so go F off. They don't care what you have and will try to make you work even if it's contagious. I get running a business because that's what I was doing for nearly 9 years, but some things these inexperienced managers do is ridiculous. Also, were the mice cooking the food using human marionettes? Well, my job has us hide the sous vide circulator from the health inspector. What? Why would the health inspector care that you guys are using a circulator? Unless it's filthy, then just clean it. If anything, sous vide is a cleaner way of cooking, because all the good food is cooked in a bag. Because in North Carolina you have to do what's called a variance to be able to do that. It's so that the health inspectors can make sure you're doing it safely. My workplace does not have the proper variance, therefore they'd get heavily dinged on the inspection. I work at a package store, liquor store for all you non-New Englanders, with a pretty big wine cellar. It's pretty cool, but we can't go down there alone because it's absolutely chock full of snakes. They're only garter snakes, and the reason they've let it continue like this is because they're keeping the mice population at bay. We have a buddy system rule because our managers are terrified someone's going to get bit one day, but for the most part they leave us alone. You guys need to get some super high boots. Yeah, those can fit way more snakes in them. Garter snakes are babies, and I've only met aggressive ones in captivity because of the dumb owner. I've yet to meet an aggressive one in the wild. I remember driving to my dog park, which is located on a mountain. I saw a huge one curled up sunning itself on the road. I literally just picked him up and put him on a boulder and the sun, and he was looking at me like, "What the frick, dude? I was comfortable there." But other than that, he was still chilling on the boulder when I drove back down. Keeping snakes because they keep the mice at bay brings to mind the Simpsons ecosystem of using killer gorillas to kill the mongooses, to kill the bird-eating lizards, to kill the pigeons. God, try saying what I just said 5 times back to back. If there's an issue with medication, too many pills, not enough, wrong, we're not allowed to tell them. We just have to leave the room with the meds and call our bosses to fix it. It's pretty easy for them to figure out what's been going on as it's kind of obvious, but we're not actually allowed to say that an error has been made. We're not allowed to be seen sitting. I'm a theatre usher. I had a job as a busser and we were never given breaks. Had a shift that averaged 6 hours and we're not allowed to be seen talking to servers casually. Sitting, and at the tail end of when I worked there, we weren't even allowed to sit in the back. We had up to 10-hour shifts where we had to stand without breaks and look busy. I never realized how much I hated that place until a few days after I quit. Work in security. Any and every unique location to commit a crime you'll get away with. The first time anyway. We don't get the funds to have real cameras over the entire mall, so we move them to blind spots where we suspect based on following other footage of the crime being committed. Then we wait for your stupid butt to go, "Wow, that was easy and nothing happened," and go for round 2. I've talked with peers in Target, Walmart, almost all over the place, and this is a constant. While there are certain high-risk zones that always have functional cameras aimed at them, if you wander off to an odd corner, odds that you'll get away with it time 1 are really good, provided you dodge the employees at the time too. Oh, and along the same vein, park your stupid frickin' car at a different parking lot if you're robbing. This is how we get you, your license plate. You don't even need a mask or a hoodie, odds are we'll never figure out who you are if you just straight up walk out with crap and off the property. I had a job which claimed all their dressings were homemade, so we had to go back to fill the couple that were not. Also, they would say that none of the desserts were frozen by keeping the freezer for the desserts, and everything else above the standard temperature for a commercial freezer. Everything. Where do I even start? Really, the only thing I'm allowed to tell the customers is this spiel about the place and where the restroom is. I really wish I could help people more than I can, but management actually trained me to actively hide things from people. Literally, I'm supposed to make the customers' lives harder. If I don't do it to management's approval, they go and hide even more things. Then again, I work in an escape room. They had us in the first half, not gonna lie. Current job I'm at told me to lie about the failed maintenance and the budget cuts in my job. At my old job at Walmart, they told me to lie about the malfunctioning fridges and cooled produce that would sit out for 8+ hours before being put into the coolers. When I worked at McDonald's back when I was at high school, there was a time I accidentally filled up a medium soda cup instead of a small for a drive-thru order. I was about to dump it when my manager takes the medium cup from my hand and poured it into a small cup, and it fit perfectly. The small and medium cups are the same volume, just different shapes. They do that at Applebee's too. If you buy a large beer, you're buying a small in a longer glass. My friends asked why I only ordered the small, and when I showed my friends, The waitstaff had a hard time explaining why they were spending more on what I was getting for half the price. Well, this is kind of weird. So my family owned a small bodega, and across from us was another bodega. We had this ripped-up blue chair where the counter was, so my grandma, mum, or me, and my brother could sit in between bagging stuff. Every time this old man, middle-aged man or his wife came in, my mum would slowly lower the chair to the ground so they couldn't see. I was a kid and thought it was a game, so I would help. Didn't realize it was weird until I became a teenager. I asked my mum why, and she was reluctant to tell me that they stole the chair from that old man's bodega from when they fired her before I was born. I find it hilarious. In case you're wondering, the old man, middle-aged man and his wife, the old man's son and daughter-in-law, weren't that petty and came in to buy stuff they didn't have at their store. They were also friends with my grandpa. Your fancy catered event? That's tap water. Bonus if your event is done by a company based in a university because your food is probably the same food that is being served in the cafeteria. I work with artists and bands. On the last tour I couldn't tell fans that the artist just didn't want to meet people at the bus, or if she was or wasn't on the bus. She had a paid-for meet and greet, so if they really wanted to meet her, they should have paid for it rather than wait outside near our home on the road. I think that's reasonable. Whether her meet and greets are paid or not, a lot of venues now have security screening, and that might prevent or discourage anyone with Selena, Dimebag, Daryl, Christina Grimmie, John Lennon type ideas. It's just good sense to meet fans in the most controlled environment available. What fact were you taught in high school that you later learned was completely untrue? All of the chemistry, about 3 times. Electrons are little balls that circle around the nucleus. Just kidding, electrons move in these little clouds around a nucleus. Just kidding, electrons move in these different hybrid clouds. Just kidding, electrons are clouds. Just kidding. F you. Also, light only moves in straight lines, except when it doesn't. Our gym teacher told us your body temperature increases by 40 degrees when you run. When we pointed out you go to the hospital with a fever of 103, she told us it was different and to stop acting smug. That's why she teaches gym. Maybe she confused temperature and heart rate? The sun is half star, half planet. I had a middle school teacher who told us that Buddhists have to pray to Buddha 3 times a day. Took me until high school before I realized he was probably thinking about Judaism. You can't take a bigger number away from a smaller number. Oh my god, yes. I remembered when we learned about negative numbers. I was so gosh darn teed off and upset. Nowadays, I tutor young kids, and when this question comes up, I will take the time to try and explain it in a very simple way that won't cloud or confuse them. One time, though, a kid got excited about what he learned and showed it to a friend and came back to me next week and said his teacher said I was wrong and that it's impossible to subtract big numbers from a small one. Come on. I can understand a teacher not wanting to confuse kids with negative numbers when they're just learning subtraction, but to straight up lie and say that it's impossible to do it is abhorrent. What's wrong with saying, yes, you can do that, and you'll learn that another time, but right now we're only going to subtract small numbers from bigger numbers? And if a kid actually learns how to do it, that teacher should encourage them. Thanks for being awesome and teaching the kids the right thing. I remember this being introduced quite early in my education, but it is entirely possible that that's just a different country's education system. Also, basic negatives are a very important concept when it comes to personal finances, stating the obvious for those who haven't considered it. In Of Mice and Men, Curly wore a leather glove filled with Vaseline. Our teacher told us it was so he could beat his wife with a softer hand. She was too embarrassed to tell us it was for getting busy. Am I the only one who finds it sad that beating his wife is more socially appropriate answer than doing the deed with his wife? That's America for you. There's even a joke about it. How do you allow an undressed woman to appear in an American movie with just a PG rating? Put a lot of bullets through her. There was a scene in Hannibal, a very violent and gory TV show, where a man and a woman's skin is peeled off their backs and raised to look like wings. The two were au naturel in this scene, shown from behind and waist up, but the network had an issue with the fact that the man's butt crack was ever so slightly visible. The show's solution? Give him a line of blood dripping down his back to make his crack less visible. I'm not even joking. Benjamin Franklin discovering electricity by flying a kite with a key on it. No, he didn't discover it, he invented it. The phenomenon of electrons moving around never happened until he flew that kite. Just like fire never existed before the cavemen, right? Adults kept telling me that people would offer me free substances. You want some dip? No thanks, I don't do dip. Good, don't start. An actual conversation I had. In 7th grade health class, we were learning about pancreatic cancer and the disease's other variants in other parts of the body. My teacher explained to the class that it can be only located on or in major organs. A few seconds after he said that, I raised my hand and said, "My grandpa had surgery to get it removed in his knee. A knee isn't a major organ, is it?" And this teacher thought about it for a minute and realized he was completely wrong and just responded with saying, "I'm not sure, let's move on." Oh crap, the knee is a major organ. We're screwed! Well, to be fair, I'm sure he didn't have it in his knee, but maybe bone cancer in his knee or something like that. I obviously don't know all the different types, but I'm pretty sure it's always on an organ, major or not. Many of you have been trying to correct me that bones are not organs, but apparently blood is not an organ. So if you absolutely need to find a way to correct the statement I said I was pretty sure about, you can cite leukemia. Cracking your knuckles will give you arthritis. I was doing it regardless of that myth. It's not like I didn't believe it, but sometimes you just have to crack your damn knuckles because your hand has a cramp or something. Very relieved to find out it was a myth. Men and women have a different number of ribs. Also some stuff about the Antichrist, but I didn't believe that. That everyone believed the world was flat until Columbus proved them wrong. Additionally, that Columbus went to his grave not knowing that he hadn't landed in the West Indies. If I recall correctly, there's a diary entry written by him acknowledging that what he had landed in was a new continent. I'm literally 100% sure that some Greek dude proved it was round by sticking a stick in the ground and measuring some angles and shadow lengths. Also, Magellan was yelling that the world was like a melon years before Columbus sailed. Was taught about Magellan's yelling in history class in middle school. Apparently Magellan wasn't old enough to do any reasonable yelling when Columbus went sailing. So add that to the list of things taught wrong. Apparently the Greek dude already knew the world was round and was trying to figure out the size of it. Add that to the list. The entire rhyme, which I've now learned is incorrect, was taught to me in middle school. It goes, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, while Magellan was still yellin' that the world was like a melon. Everything about chemistry. In grade 9, we were introduced to chemistry. Then in the later grades, they were like, everything you were taught was essentially wrong. We did it to simplify things. Here's how it actually is. Then in university, they go, lol, everything you were taught in high school was wrong. It's actually like this. Looking back, I wasn't bad at chemistry, I always did well, but because of this constant flip-flopping, I'm still confused about some of the basics, for example, acids. I remember taking the AP Chem exam, and my sister was in college studying biochem, and I heard her say to her friend, Gen Chem is a lie. After that, I started searching for clues. I finally got it when, after the unit on ideal gases, I asked why they're called ideal gases, and realized everything we just learned basically didn't apply to real life. But only a very small percentage of things, or they'd always say, there's an exception to this rule, and then it turned out mostly everything was the exception to the rule. I was so irritated. Actually, the ideal gas law is a pretty good approximation of the real thing in most cases. You'd be surprised. It isn't wrong, it's just not 100% accurate. However, it is a useful tool for thinking about how gases really do behave, so it's not a waste of time to learn it at all. Basically, it's as though you first learned that pi is equal to 3. And then in high school learned, actually it's 3.14, then in college learned, really it's closer to 3.14159. Were any of those things actually wrong? Not really. None of those things are totally correct either. But then why would you bother memorizing 500,000 digits of pi? What would that get you, really? I was today years old when I was hit with the knowledge that ideal gases are an approximation of a pure gas instead of how most of it is found. I guess you learn something every week with this job. That you have to round up all the numbers after the decimal point. Example 1.07883666272, round the 0 to a 1, the 7 to an 8, 8 to a 9, etc. That people in slavery were paid, just not very much, and they were given a choice between a penny and a dime, but chose the penny because it was bigger, as if that was somehow less racist. What the frick? It's illegal to sell yo-yos at yard sales. You only use 10% of your brain. Fricking liars. That the ancient Romans had places called vomitoriums where they would go and gorge themselves on food, then spew to make room for more. Gross, right? Kind of like that one scene in Catching Fire. Vomitoriums were actually a sort of hallway designed for spectators to exit the Colosseum and other arenas as efficiently as possible. I never knew that. They did show us pictures of big rooms with a lot of holes around the walls. Turns out those were public toilets. I simply assumed the vomit room looked slightly different, but they printed the wrong picture. Also, so many erroneous pictures in schoolbooks. So many. As a Latin teacher, I constantly have to correct students, teachers, and parents about what a vomitorium is. The most common response I hear is, "But it's in the Hunger Games books." Yeah, those are about a fictional society. That there wasn't any air combat during World War I because the planes were only used for scouting. What about the Red Baron? Didn't a lot of planes back then essentially try to kill each other with handheld pistols fired from the cockpit? In the earliest days, yes. It gets a lot more sophisticated pretty fast, especially with the development of synchronization devices that allowed automatic weapons to fire through propellers. As a teacher, I have a few rules for myself to avoid becoming one of these teachers. 1. Always admit you are wrong about something when you are. It's important for kids to know you're fallible, like everyone else on the planet, and that it's okay to be wrong about stuff every once in a while. 2. Use discussion paired with internet searches to try and find what the correct answer actually is. I teach 2nd grade, so we don't exactly have to go to Google Scholar, but we definitely go over the importance of checking over multiple sources and not believing everything we read on the internet. 3. Teach kids that it's okay not to know something or have a misconception about something. The pursuit of truth is infinitely more important than knowing something outright. Although it's not embedded in our curriculum, I take time every day to explicitly teach critical thinking skills. I actively do this too. Thanks for letting me know that there are teachers who know how to be wrong and how to fact-check and be open to multiple interpretations. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. George Washington cut down a cherry tree. Also not exactly untrue, but I have no idea why we need to practice recorders. I think recorders are probably the simplest, cheapest wind instrument, and teaching music is healthy, exercising a kid's brain in a different artistic way. Usually this is taught in the 4th or 5th grade, so by middle school they can choose a complicated, specialized instrument and join band or orchestra. That I wouldn't be paid to stare out the window all day. I'm a pilot. My 7th grade health teacher, "Black people can't swim. Their bones are much denser than ours. I've seen black kids jump into the pool. They just sink like rocks." Imagine my surprise when moving away from Union, Indiana. Oh my god, when was this, if you don't mind me asking? My health teacher in the 7th grade told us all Native Americans have high cheekbones. If someone has high cheekbones, they're native, like Michael Jackson. Where in the frick are these 7th grade teachers being educated? Is anyone else a bit nervous there's a Klan university that we don't know about? Blood is blue when it's inside your body. When I was in 6th grade, the smartest kid in the class told us this. The kid was legit smart in math and was many years ahead of us. I disagreed. Everyone else agreed with the smart guy, even the teacher. I asked how come when doctors draw blood, it's red. He said because there's oxygen in the needle and that it turns the blood red. Fair enough. I then asked how would anyone know it was blue. He said something about vacuums. At that point, the class lost focus. I lost, he won. He is wrong though, and I'm vindicated. While silly Americans spent millions building a zero-gravity pen that could write in space, the Russians used pencils. Actually, NASA programs previously used pencils, but because of the substantial dangers that broken pencil tips and graphite dust posed to electronics in zero gravity, the flammable nature of wood present in pencils, and the inadequate quality documentation produced by non-permanent or smeared record keeping, a better solution was needed. Russian cosmonauts used pencils and grease pencils on plastic slates until also adopting a space pen in 1969, with a purchase of 100 units for use on all future missions. NASA never approached Paul Fisher, the inventor, to develop a pen, nor did Fisher receive any government funding for the pen's development. Fisher invented it independently and then, in 1965, asked NASA to try it. After extensive testing, NASA decided to use the pens in future Apollo missions. I was always fed this one, with varying degrees of smugness about how stupid Americans were, by my science teachers no less. Turns out the Americans were making a calculated decision to not get graphite in their instruments. That there were different sections of the tongue for salty, sweet, sour, and bitter taste buds. I remember testing this myself once. I took some piece of candy and stuck it on a sweet zone, then on some other zone and thought it tasted exactly the same. Even as a kid, I wasn't sure about the legitimacy of this claim. We did this during Girl Scouts. Everyone was like, wow, it works. And I'm sitting there like, sure. This was a very popular science experiment in schools and youth groups. probably repeated millions of times and demonstrated the conclusion even though it was absolutely bogus and in fact completely untrue. It should be a warning about the power of assumptions and a reminder of the effort required by scientists who actually do meaningful experiments and get valid results. It isn't easy. Because teachers convinced us that you couldn't begin a sentence with because, I believed it to be true. And they told you not to start a sentence with a conjunction, and that hell would make a special room for you should you decide a proposition would be a good word to end on. Ending a sentence with a proposition is something up with which I will not put. Winston Churchill. Back in 7th grade life class, my female teacher and mother of 3 told us that girls cannot have a climax. Looking back, I honestly feel bad for the woman. How can you go through life and have 3 children of your own without ever knowing that you could have a climax? 1. Future employers will see how many detentions you've had during school. 2. There are 52 states in the USA. This was a mistake in a textbook, so this was taught to a whole generation of Austrians, probably also Germans. 3. In a geography class, a student asked why the north of Ireland was a part of the UK. The professor replied, because Ireland gave it to the British. Coming from a very patriotic Irish family, this was a shock to say the least. 4. High school students told me how professors in college and university don't help you with anything and you're completely on your own. After explaining difficulty I had with one of my papers to my professor, he gave me the names of about 5 to 6 authors he knows who write on the subject and essentially gave me half my research. Another time, a professor actually loaned me a copy of the book the library was out of, so I could photocopy a chapter I needed for my final paper. Most of my professors would answer questions over email or after class too. In most cases, professors help more than high school teachers. I knew it at the time, but my science teacher in the 8th grade taught that the Big Bang theory was the idea that the moon was formed by a collision between Earth and a Mars-sized asteroid. I told her this was not the case, and her excuse was that it was simplified so that everyone could understand it better. To be clear, I know that that is how the moon was formed, but the teacher was trying to say this was the Big Bang, like the beginning of the universe, even wording it as such. Yes, the Moon and the modern Earth were formed by a massive impact between proto-Earth and another object called Theia. This is, however, not the Big Bang Theory and was not the beginning of the universe. First year in college, the year was 2000. My intro to Comp Sci professor looked at me with 2 heads when I asked him if the exams were open book. His response, after the shocked pause, was something along the lines of, "Do you think you'll have access to the book when you go into the real world?" It was my time to mirror his look of shock as I'd completed my 2nd year of co-op employment through my trade school where I was employed as a DB admin and web developer and had not only books to reference but also w3school.com bookmarked in Internet Explorer 6. In kindergarten, the teacher's aide told us that north is always forward no matter what direction you're facing. During recess, I figured out which way north really was and told her. Her response was, "Only if you're facing that way." I think she thought that we were unable to understand north, south, east, west, and she got really mad at me when I proved her wrong. Until she was eventually fired a few years later, she tried to punish me with anything possible. For example, when I talked during lunch, she moved me to a different table. Some mother frickers are always trying to ice skate uphill. Trolling before the age of the internet. Also, when you see the moon, that's actually the sun after the Lightmaster General has turned down the dimmer for the day. Tell all your parents about our recent budget cuts. That the Vietnam War was a tie. And that's putting it pretty generously. In fairness, the Viet Cong haven't reached DC yet. To be fair, there's a substantial number of people both in the States and abroad who either just don't know who won that war, or who outright think that the US won it. It doesn't help that most Vietnam War movies tend to end in one battle that the US comes out on top of. Was taught in middle school that the US has never been invaded outside of Pearl Harbor. War of 1812, Britain used troops from Canada to enter the US. We surrendered Detroit. Later on, British troops burned down the White House. Remember the famous painting of George Washington? It was rescued from the fire from Dolly Madsen. World War II, Aleutian Islands. A small Japanese force occupied the islands of Attu and Kiska, but the remoteness of the islands and the difficulties of the weather and terrain meant that it took nearly a year for a far larger US and Canadian force to eject them. There were also reports of German World War II U-boats off the East Coast and Japanese balloon bombs in Washington state. I was in my early 20s when I started learning on my own about history. Went to private Christian school. The one I always got was, when you're out of college and in the real world, you need to be firm with your faith. People will challenge you left and right. Professors might try to debate you and break you down, and other people will be bombarding your faith everywhere you go. Thanks for the scare tactics, but the most conflict I've had was with a classmate and it went, "Oh, you're Christian? I was raised Catholic, but I'm an atheist now. What did you get for number 7? Instructor at a state school here. If anything, most of us are terrified to even touch on the topic of religion in class, for fear of bringing up a debate where nobody is going to budge. If we come out as religious, we're prejudiced. If we don't, we're queer, liberal, atheist, hippie feminists who would love nothing better than to rip your faith to shreds in front of you. It's a lose-lose, man. I just pretend like it doesn't exist, and I teach in the humanities." You're telling me teachers don't like to bring up complicated discussions that inevitably lead to everybody getting really angry, tons of drama, and waste a lot of time? Weird. I discovered in college that the more know-it-all you were about your beliefs on religious subjects, the more pushback you got from everybody else. You can be religious like Mr. Rogers was religious, and nobody will want to argue with you. You can be religious like Fred Phelps was religious, and people will get in your face all the time. That you don't have any rights in school. Like at all. No freedom of speech, no freedom of expression, nothing. This was in public school in the early 2000s. I mean, your rights are limited though. I remember being in a grade 10 science class and learning that everything I learned in grade 9 science was a lie. From what I understand, sciences are just one of a long chain of, okay, it's not like that, it's actually more like this. Wikipedia is a terrible resource that's often inaccurate because literally anyone can instantly change literally any article. Wikipedia checks every edit within 24 hours if I recall correctly, and they definitely screen new users somehow. I tried editing a small backwater page once for craps and giggles, and my edit never happened. More importantly, Wikipedia has stood up to every instance of cross-referencing that I've done, and I've written a decent number of research papers. Whenever I was told I couldn't use Wikipedia as a resource, I'd do it anyway, but I would click the links that Wikipedia cited, make sure the info was there in a way I could reasonably comprehend, and would cite that instead. I'm a master's student, and I do that too. Previous PhD student here, I used Wikipedia when writing my thesis. I had a psychology class in high school where we did the whole unit on dream interpretation, Jungian symbols and the metaphor of different events. Get to college and one psychology degree later, I've been told about 15 times that Jung was too high to find his toes and is barely more credible than Freud. Dream interpretation is basically useless. Who is the most delusional person you've known? I work in a small-town radio station. I've seen a lot of rookies fresh out of broadcast school let the tiny amount of fame they get from being on a small-town radio station go to their head. This one guy came into work one day, madder than hell that small-town radio famous wasn't enough to get him out of a speeding ticket. My brother was always bragging about how chicks he worked with wanted to bang him. Then after 2 or 3 months, when he inevitably quit or got fired, whenever the guys were talking about chicks they hooked up with, he would always talk about these beautiful women that wanted him, which he just never got around to hooking up with. One time, after starting a new job, he comes home all excited and yells, "Holy crap, the receptionist at this place is gorgeous, and guess what? She wants to F me." I said, "Dude, you've been there one day. How do you know she wants to F you?" So he says, "Well, I just walked through the front door, and as I was passing by, she looks me dead in the eye and says, 'Good morning.'" Oh my god, I lost it with that last bit. Good morning equals she wants to bang me? That's the most delusional thing I've ever heard. My current boss. He thinks the business is doing okay or is in a rough spot. He's slowly choking and killing it with his managing. I see the shop closing in mid to late August. Won't you feel stupid when it closes in early September? Seriously though, I hope he turns it around quick and that you don't lose your job, and if you do, I hope you find something quickly. Worked a night job where I met someone who was studying rather than going to school. Eventually I got out of him that he was studying to be a seducer. He studied Cleopatra, Rasputin, Casanova, etc. to learn the art of seduction. Basically, this guy's life plan was to just seduce his way through life. He had an intricate plan on how he was going to seduce our supervisor for a raise, seduce multiple spouses to support him, even how to get free coffee by seducing the barista. He must have done a lot of seducing to keep working that barely over minimum wage night job for years. Sounds like he put his buy into charisma and his dump stat is intelligence. Ah, the charismatic idiot savant playthrough of life. Sounds like this man was trying to go for a path of life that would have got him into the Gold Diggers video we did a few weeks ago. Better luck next time, failed social climber. My aunt, as in my mum's sister. She constantly stirs drama with other people and then calls you out for being mean to her. What the frick, lady? For example, one time I came outside and I see her pull up in her car. She starts chit-chatting to my mum. They're talking about her haircut. I tell my mum we needed to go and she drove away shortly after. Totally fine. I get a call from another relative a week later that she's angry with me because the day she came over I rolled my eyes and she reads lips. She knows I said something about her. This didn't happen. She then continues to post on social media how karma is going to get me, while simultaneously commenting on all of my stuff, saying how cute my daughter is. Delusion. This is my aunt exactly. She's also a drama queen. I visit my family once a year for a week, so I go to see my aunt and my mom at the same time. Every year, my aunt will cause some drama. This year, she launched into a casual conversation with me and just said, "You know your boyfriend kinda looks like a rat?" Told her that's not an okay thing to say. She said the truth hurts to hear. I got angry and left. Next morning, she waltzes in like nothing happened. Asks me to come and give her a hug hello. I say no, explaining that what she said was really hurtful. She then flips her crap and starts screaming, "Why are you always starting stuff up like this? We never get into fights when you're not here. You're always causing trouble." I was so shocked, I just left. A very, very good friend of mine comes from a super rich family. His dad recently bought $1 million home to sell to him for under $300,000. He thinks his family isn't that wealthy and that this isn't that abnormal. There's always been a number of Ask Reddit threads like "Who's the richest person you know?" and they're always fascinating reading. There are people like your friend who have no idea that it's not normal to be able to buy $1 million home or a yacht without blinking. One of my favorite comments was about a clueless girl from a very rich family who visited an equally rich friend. Friend's daddy had just bought her a huge, gorgeous penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Clueless friend looked around the place and said, "Wow, this is really nice. How much do you think the rent here would be? $1,000 a month?" Then she looked confused when the guy who wrote the story, who wasn't rich, started laughing. "I mean, it's a banana, Michael. What would it cost? $10? For those wondering, penthouse rent in Manhattan is probably somewhere around $15K per month. My little sister. Me and my eldest sister were raised by an alcoholic mother who left us with random people so she could get drunk. When I was about 6, my mum sobered up and had my little sister. The girl is delusional and has adopted the idea that she went through what me and my older sister went through. She recalls memories that never happened. She swears my mum beat her. Never happened. She makes up stories like she was a mortician, traveled around the world, she dated such and such, and had tons of money. It's so weird. She spends every waking moment on Facebook and posts every single thing that goes on in her life. She has a felony, she beat her baby daddy until they broke up, and now both of those psychos have really crappy custody fights going on. I could go on and on. Sounds like a compulsive liar. I dated one of those. Frick all that. My schizophrenic uncle. He ran away from home in the US in his teens to Turkey, converted to Islam, came home a few years later, believed he was the son of God and robbed a bank so that he could give the money to the homeless in the city we live in. He was institutionalized for many years and was released one day with no notice to our family, and died shortly thereafter of an accident caused by his mental illness. Well, I can't fault his intentions. This dude who used to live near me. There's a laundry list of stories, but 2 gems are when he took those fake $1 billion bills you can get at Halloween from church groups to Walmart, filled 8 shopping carts with random expensive stuff, mostly electronics, and tried to buy them with the, quote, money. Or when, after the cops were called on him for shooting our much younger brother with an airsoft gun, he grabbed a samurai sword and charged at the cops. Spoiler alert, he got tased. He later told us if they shot at him, he would cut the bullets in half, like Ryan Reynolds did in X-Men Origins Wolverine. That dude is lucky he didn't get shot. I realize the dude was probably white. That said, getting shot by the police can happen to anyone, and if you try to attack a police officer with a potentially lethal weapon, you can reasonably expect for it to happen to you. The cops understood that their bullets were of no use in the situation. He had been studying the blade since he was but a child. My ex-boyfriend plays the victim to his friends and family, yet I've spoken to 2 of his exes and we've all called the cops on him at some point. He obsesses and stalks and plays weird games. He tried to break into my apartment once after we broke up to apologize to me and tried to convince my roommate I was unstable and making rash choices. We've been broken up 7 months now. I have a new boyfriend and he still sends me emails saying I'm being unreasonable. This reminds me of my uncle. 3 out of 4 of his wives have literally fled from him in the dead of night. One of them took their daughter and sought asylum in Germany, where her mother was a citizen. He's a criminal and a sociopath, but neither he nor my grandparents see it. Some years ago, my grandfather had to get triple bypass surgery. There were some complications. He was in the hospital for months, and no one knew if he was ever going to make it out again. When he finally did, he discovered that the same uncle had stolen over $1 million from him over the months he was in hospice. Did my grandfather finally see him for what he was? Nope. He blamed my uncle's most recent ex-wife, calling her the criminal mastermind. She was the stupidest woman I've ever met, but at least she was smart enough to get away from him. Met a guy in the psych ward with psychosis who believed that he was a prophet. Really nice guy. I've a quote written by him. "Madness is not pure error, it is nature's dissatisfaction with genius." My grandmother was a psych nurse in a ward years ago, and she encountered a patient who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. He even walked like Jesus. She said, "If I hadn't known he was nuts, I might have believed him." Back in the day when mental health experiments were just doctors saying, "I wonder what happens when we combine these specific types of crazy people," there was a case where doctors put 3 second coming of Jesus guys together to see what would happen. Anticlimactically, each of the 3 merely thought the other 2 were poor, deluded souls. I wanted them to merge into one super prophet. We are Threesus. I would like to thank everyone who combined their stories into that last exchange. The humor can be hard to come by in scripts about the mentally ill or deluded. I spent the first 11 months of my army career with this one guy who had absolutely no idea that everybody hated him. He had this horrible personality where he talked too loud, said frick all the time, stole crap, and fricked with other people's stuff, and just seemed kind of like an alien trying to mimic heterosexual male interactions. But the alien had only studied bad sports movies and war films. He was incredibly cringy. Guy was raised by a single mother that clearly allowed him to get away with anything, and in 11 months I knew him, I never once heard him take responsibility for anything. An example, we'll call him PH for dialogue purposes. We're in the lunch line and he gets a big bowl of clam chowder soup, he spills a little over the side of the bowl and onto the tray, and we're like, looks like you spilled a bit. Keep in mind we saw him spill it. PH? No, I didn't spill it. Well, who spilled it then? Frick, I don't frickin' know. I guess someone frickin' knocked me and made the bowl spill. As I said, he swore all the time. You know you swear too much when a bunch of army dudes think you swear too much. Yeah, literally couldn't take responsibility for spilling a little bit of soup in a tray. As said though, the most delusional aspect of his personality was his complete inability to accept that nobody liked him. When our final course, combat engineer training, finished, and we were all about to get posted off to our respective units and bases across the country, he'd always talk about how he was going to hang with the people who were going to the same place as him, and maybe be roommates with one of them. To a man, each one of them never wanted to see him ever again. It took on average about 2 weeks from the point of meeting him to completely despise him, and he was never once aware or willing to admit this. As said by one of our sergeants at the end of our course, at the course party, that kid's a frickin' lunatic. Couldn't have said it better myself. Are you talking about Sterling Archer? Isn't it funny how we all love Archer, but if he were real and we were friends with him, we would just think he's a pathetic idiot. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My cousin has insisted to my family that I get exorcised because I'm gay and autistic. She thinks that only the devil himself can corrupt someone to my extent. The problems with her theory are that I'm neither gay nor autistic, and she's the one touched by Satan. This reminds me of that Yahoo Answers post where someone said his mom made him wear a butt plug at all times when he was 5, or Satan would violate him and make him gay. That's nowhere near as bad as that Facebook trend where moms would give their wee kids bleach enemas and then point at the shredded colon lining and say, "Look at that big worm that came out of him. That's what caused his autism." People are effed. Guy at my college thought he was God's gift to women just because he worked out daily. He looked more like an albino Dwayne Johnson with curly hair. It was like Casper took roids and started hitting on anything that moved. That last sentence made me really feel like I could hate him and be justified in doing so. I love unrepentant buttholes that I can take out all of the rage I have stored up from my day-to-day life on. Mine is my boyfriend's best friend in the whole world, and he's a frickin' nutter. Sometimes it's funny to hear him explain his theories, but other times it's sad and frustrating. I care about him, but often worry that he may be mentally ill. A few examples: that the Earth is flat and that NASA and all the other scientists are in on the secret and want to keep it from the public. They don't want us to know because it somehow directly proves God's existence, and they don't want that. All ice cream starts as vanilla ice cream until you add flavors to it. He thinks the absence of added flavor is vanilla. The government uses airplanes to spray us all with metal particles that makes people have autism. Also related, he doesn't believe that regular clouds are made out of water vapor. He thinks that semen never leave the female body after people do the deed and that it collects in the uterus somewhere. If a woman does the deed with multiple men over the course of her life, then her child will genetically be a mixture of all those men. This is why he thinks God wants us to only do the deed with our husband or wife. Do I even need to keep going? Okay then, prior to his flat earth theory where he believed in space and NASA and whatnot, he saw a photo of what looked like the claw or hand of a Jurassic Park dinosaur in the corner of a photo taken from Mars. This was clearly a clickbait bullcrap internet photo, but he believed it to be real. He said, "I think they got the whole creature on camera, but they're just showing a hand so that we don't all freak out at once." He told me that he thought keto diet was just fat. Yes, you heard that right, just fat. I told him that's borderline impossible because if you were to eat just fat, you'd essentially just be eating olive oil and butter, so not only would you crap your brains out, you'd also never get any vitamins or nutrients, which you need to live. He didn't understand. In a religious debate, how can you prove that Christianity is the religion of truth if every other religion believes it is the truth? I told him it isn't solid evidence to use the Bible, because most religions have their own sacred scriptures that refute the Bible. If everyone believes their book, using yours won't make a difference. He told me I was being hormonal, and that's why I didn't see eye to eye with him. Are you satisfied yet? Alright, a few more because it feels great to get a chance to share some of these. He recently informed me that God taught him that watering your grass will make it green. I told him that that was just standard lawn maintenance and general knowledge, but he argued that only those who know the Lord take the time to water their lawns. He doesn't understand what door-to-door salesmen are. One was at his house asking his grandfather, the homeowner, for some info to complete an order he was making. He wanted his name, phone number, and the exact address. My friend thought it was incredibly suspicious that he just showed up, even though the guy had on a uniform and a marked vehicle, so he called the cops, who were very confused when they arrived. He firmly believes that fat people are fat because of cake. Not trans fats, not excess sugar, not hidden calories and misleading portion sizes, just cake. If you try to pry further, he'll explain that there's nowhere you can go where you can't buy some form of cake. It's delicious and horrible for you. That's why people are so fat, 'cause cake is too yummy and too easy to get. When I tried to tell him that in that way he's right, but it's more of an issue of junk food rather than just the cake, he said, "You wouldn't know 'cause you've never been fat. I have, so I would know." We'll end this with my boyfriend's favorite. He thinks that the birds outside his window are watching him. Keep in mind, his house is 2 floors and he's on the 2nd floor, which is right at eye level with the tree in the front yard, which has a huge bird feeder. And yet he thinks that for whatever reason, these birds are obsessed with him and watch him 24/7. I can't decide if I want to watch nothing but this man's life on TV, or if I've already heard way too much about him. This is why you need to get off the internet and go outside from time to time, people. After this video, of course. It's the vanilla ice cream part of the story that's really bothering me. It makes sense to someone who just barely understands language and flavors because we use vanilla to describe something that's plain. But really, it's not that hard to look up the actual plant it comes from, so they're not only operating on extremely basic understandings, they're clearly refusing to even attempt to enhance it. My little sister, who somehow got it into her head that we grew up in the ghetto. We didn't, and that it is okay to just keep popping out kids with different baby daddies because if God didn't want me to have babies, he wouldn't let me get pregnant. Oh my freaking God, I want to hit her in the face every time she says something like this. By the way, she's now pregnant with her 5th child, right after being a complete hypocrite when she got pregnant last year and had a termination because she wanted a girl. She's finally having her girl, so hopefully she stops. And before I get a bunch of angry messages, she lives off the government. Baby daddies do not support their kids, so she brags about being a hustler. My uncle decided his thoughts were so profound, he tried selling printed canvases with some of his quotes on them. Yes, sentences he came up with himself. And no, he's not successful or any sort of leader in his field, nor anything that would warrant quoting or displaying anything he's ever said. He also decided to write a book of his life, of which he's achieved sucking my auntie dry of money and contact with her family because none of us want to be around him. Spiritually pious and delusions of grandeur. My father. The man does not live in the same reality as the rest of us. He's almost 60 and thinks he's going to make it in the music business, despite the fact that he has no band and plays no gigs. He's a passable guitar player, but the typical guy that had a band in the 70s and early 80s. Takes himself way too seriously, as if he's some kind of prolific musician. He took some mediocre pictures of the band Genesis in the 80s and has called himself a photographer since then. He built himself and a couple of friends some very primitive websites and calls himself a web designer. He took a, as in one, class on sound engineering at the community college in like 1980 and calls himself a sound engineer. He even has a couple of video cameras and knows the basics of video editing and now bills himself as a videographer for local bands. The man just makes crap up to make himself seem important. He hasn't had an actual job in 13 years. He's been self-employed in that time, but you need to have actual clients and stuff. He thinks he's above everyone, the smartest guy in the room, and he's just this grand person. It's ridiculous. I don't know how his wife puts up with it. An ex-friend of mine cried multiple times because she thought guys were only interested in me and not her, and that I must be doing something insane to attract their attention, since she's the skinnier and more obsessed with her looks one. My guess, her personality was probably repulsive after 2 weeks tops. I'm guessing she was clingy too. She probably also wasn't nearly as attractive as she thought she was and confused skinny with hot. Definitely my uncle. He claims to be the descendant of some wealthy noble family from Germany and goes around genealogy websites adding himself and my grandmother to said family, claiming she's a princess. Not my dad though, he doesn't count. This is only the latest one. He's also pretended to be a priest and a diplomat at some point, as well as having several diseases, so he could get money, sympathy from people, and heavy prescription drugs. HIV, melanoma, Parkinson's, the list goes on. We tried having him admitted, but he always gets discharged a day or two later, since he's very good at convincing everyone that he's fine and that it's us who wants him out of the picture. Man, I thought most of these would be funny, but now I'm kind of sad. It's terrifying to think that people can go their whole lives, their one-shot at existence, being so sheltered and afraid. What a bummer. My friend's ex went off her bipolar meds because she was convinced that love was the cure to her bipolar disorder. I feel better now, so that means I don't need my meds anymore. Bipolar isn't a bacterial infection. You don't take meds for a while and then you're cured of it. Weirdly, they broke up after about the millionth violent mood swing, and now she spends her days getting fired from every single job and doing hallucinogenics. Both my aunt and uncle on my mum's side of the family, mum's brother and his wife, my grandmother's health was declining and my uncle fully supported my aunt so she didn't work. Instead of putting my grandmother in a home, they offered to move her into their house so my aunt could take care of her. Meanwhile, my mum was in the process of divorcing my dad, selling the house and working 70 hours a week to keep up at a job she hated. In the midst of all that, my aunt asked if my mum could come over to be with my grandmother on the day she was meeting with the lawyer to finalize her divorce. Mum said she couldn't make it, and my aunt told her that if she really loved her mother, she'd make time and would move her appointment with the lawyer, even though she came to the house every day after work to see her. Finally, my mum admitted to my uncle, her brother, that she was suicidal and wanted a way out. He then proceeded to tell her that she was a horrible person and was useless because she didn't want to help. That was years ago, and no one in my family has said a word to them since. We've all moved on and are very happy without them. What's the best loophole that you've ever found? I coach a high school team. We recently bought airfare with Spirit Airlines to take 9 students to a competition. 2 of the students cancelled about a month out from the trip, and we had to replace them with 2 different students. Spirit Airlines policy, no name changes. Can't even pay a fee to change the name. The tickets are basically lost. I have to buy new tickets. Spirit's customer service is overseas and they plainly don't care at all about customer service because they don't actually work for Spirit, etc., etc. Except that Spirit Airlines does allow passengers to correct misspellings, and these folks don't really recognize nonsense names. So over 4 calls, I changed the names of the cancelled students to the names of the new students, 2 letters at a time. No one at Spirit customer service made a note because who would care, and no one ever notices that the correct names during the intermediate steps were nonsense. Also, F Spirit Airlines. Some new magazine was asking college students to send out subscription forms by email to all their friends. For each 25 emails you sent, you'd get a $10 Amazon gift card. Turns out they didn't need to be real emails. I made about $100 before they told me to stop. At my university, there was a command which you could use on their Unix systems to get a list of all the email addresses in the university, which is why I guess my university email was always spammed. I wasn't hacking, they just didn't set up user permissions properly. My justification as to why it's not hacking is that we had authorization to log into the system with our own user accounts, and the command we used is a thoroughly documented, supported operating system command used with its intended purpose. We also did tell the admins because we were sick of our email being spammed too. There's really no difference between performing whatever command it was, I forget now, and is, cd, touch, ifconfig and so on and so forth. Bonus shady loophole though, on my CS assignments the professors would use the Unix timestamps as submission times, and if I noticed I made a mistake on my homework, I could set the timestamp on my homework assignments using the touch command. In first grade, our school had Catch a Kid cards. Every time you did something good, you'd get one. Whoever had the most at the end of the year won a prize. My teacher, to promote animal awareness or some crap, gave us one card for each newspaper story we brought in that had something to do with animals. So instead of being a good kid and doing good deeds, I just combed through the newspaper each day and hoarded cards through animal stories. Eventually she was like, "Alright, for frick's sake, you're only getting half a card for each story." And I was like, "Miss Fives, I do not give a frick," and continued bringing in the stories. I destroyed all the competition and won the grand prize of a $50 Toys R Us gift card, which, when converted from 6-year-old dollars into US dollars, is about $24,500. Yes, that sounds like something the young narrator would have done as well. I think $50 when I was a kid would have purchased enough cheap plastic knickknacks to fill an entire closet and make all of my friends jealous. Best Buy had double trade-in value on games several times. Craigslist people want cash instead of store credit, but used games for $20 get $25 in trade-in, which doubles to our $50 store credit. I ended up with about $1,200 in store credit, which cost me maybe $400. My old bank used to give me $2 reimbursement any time I used another bank's ATM to cover the fee. There was a local bank ATM that charged a $1.50 fee, so I would make 50 cents 3 times a month. I assume they had a max on this, or I'd just sit at the ATM all day. Assuming 30 seconds per transaction, you're making $60 an hour running the ATM. I could only do it 3 times per month. So what are you doing now that you have all that extra scratch? How many islands do you own? Years ago, I signed up for the Columbia House DVD of the month when I was 16. Most of you probably don't know about this, but it was a deal where you get a dozen DVDs for free and then had to buy one a month for $15. If you didn't order a movie that month, they would send you one that was their selection of the month. Anyway, when I got all the free movies, I wrote them a letter stating I wasn't 18 and they cancelled my subscription and let me keep the movies for free. Also, back then you could just sign up with a fake name. It was a simpler time. I would sign up for those CD clubs and get the initial shipment with the commitment to buy more and an auto-shipped selection of the month. You could return a form to refuse the selection, or they would send it to you automatically. Inside the auto-ship package would be a couple of coupons for 2 more free CDs. I'd get the auto-ship package, open it, take the coupons, and then glue the package closed and mark it Return to Sender. Ended up scoring a couple dozen more free CDs that way before they stopped auto-shipping me the monthly selection. Back when I was much younger, maybe around 8 or 9, my stepfather, notorious spicy food connoisseur, dared me to eat a chili pepper. After I refused, he told me that if I could eat the whole thing, he'd buy me an Xbox. He hadn't said anything about chewing, so I cut the pepper into 3 and swallowed them whole with some milk. Always to keep his word, he bought me an Xbox the following day. My stepdad doesn't play video games and has admitted he wouldn't think to do it, which is why he made that deal in the first place. I work at McDonald's. The first thing that comes to mind is the one time when a guy ordered a 50-cent cone in a cup and Oreo crumbs on the side. He mixed it together right there at the counter and made a cheap version of a McFlurry, which is $2.50. I'll throw in another story for good measure. A lady wanted a McChicken meal, McChicken sandwich, medium fries, medium drink, but wanted all the contents ordered separately. On the screen there's a meal button that groups everything together. Ordering everything separately made it like $1 cheaper. If you do your own brake job, you can buy brakes from AutoZone that include a warranty. This warranty just so happens to cover normal wear and tear. Every time you need new brakes, bring in the worn-out ones and you get a new set for free. Seriously amazing. When Verizon changed their unlimited plan, we got to keep ours due to being grandfathered in. Basically, as long as we kept our phones, we kept the plan. But once we upgraded, we would have to switch plans. My family has 4 phones, 3 smartphones and my little brother's dumb phone with no data. After we went to upgrade, we asked the Verizon rep if there was a way we could keep unlimited. After some experimenting with the system, we found a way. She moved my data package to my brother's phone since he didn't have any data, upgraded my phone, then moved the data package back. Same for my parents' phones. So we got to keep the unlimited and we still got our upgrade. Screw you Verizon, but major props to your employees. I also have Verizon. However, I think they blocked this loophole. However, you can get new old phones or used ones and swap out the SIM card. I've done this twice. I earn double points on my credit card through gas and grocery purchases, so when I plan to buy something, say at Lowe's or go out to eat, I go to the grocery store and buy a gift card, double points for the gift card and at least double fuel points through the grocery store. There was a McDonald's near my college and in it was an ATM. If you used the ATM and got a receipt, it would come with a coupon for a buy one, get one free large sandwich. I'd swipe my card, hit cancel, and a receipt would print out showing the cancellation. I would then find someone in line buying a large sandwich and hand it over to them. Free sandwiches for about 8 months until it finally went away. I don't eat at McDonald's anymore. Watched a guy do this over the course of about 1.5 years when I worked for a credit card company. The guy was getting a divorce but wanted to hide some of the money from his soon-to-be ex-wife. So he overpaid his credit card by $80,000. He then called us to issue a check for the money, so on his statements it would reflect a zero balance. But he would never cash the check, so it would come back on our books. Every 6 months, the balance would return and he would call to have a new check issued so it looked like an accounting error. From what I understood, the lawyer only reviewed a couple of months' worth of credit card statements, and he timed the issuance of the check just right so no one was the wiser. He called and spoke to a guy on my team and told him the whole story, and then we issued the check for the last time and never heard from him again. I used to work as a teller for a credit union. Guy would do the same thing. We would cut cashier checks out to a neutral account, so he just took all of his money as cashier checks payable to himself, came in on the 6 months mark to recut the checks, hid so much money from his wife. When I first got an iPhone, I brought an insurance package that I thought covered just about anything. After about a month of having my new iPhone, I got a really bad scratch on the screen. The scratch haunted me and would constantly imagine a nice fresh screen again, so I went to the insurance company and asked them to replace it. The insurance rep told me my coverage is limited to more severe damage like cracks and water damage, not scratches. So naturally, I went into the parking lot and tanked my phone against the pavement, completely obliterating the screen. I walked back into the same insurance rep, acted like I wasn't there 5 minutes ago, and explained that my phone was severely damaged and I wanted a replacement. In 4 days, I had a nice smooth iPhone free of charge, this time with a screen protector. Not my find, but my mother's. Back in the day, when a woman needed her husband's permission to get a loan or sign up for a credit card, my mother used to take advantage of the "sign up for our store credit today and get X gift for free." She would fill out the form completely, but since my father refused to sign the permission section because he thought it was stupid that she would need permission from her husband in the first place, the credit card company would throw out her application, so she would get the free gift either way. She must have done this a dozen or more times. Yes, game the patriarchy, madam. Game it for all it's worth. Oh, and the credit card companies as well, I suppose. Double win. Not my loophole, but whatever. The American government wanted, and still wants, people to use $1 coins instead of notes. So they started selling $1 coins for $1. People used their credit cards to buy $100,000 worth of coins and then immediately deposited them all into their bank, taking them out of circulation again, to pay off their credit card and then reap the rewards from the credit card usage, usually in the realms of frequent flyer miles. People were accumulating millions of dollars worth of airline travel for free. You're forgetting an important part of the loophole: free shipping. In order to encourage wider distribution of the coins, the US Mint offered free shipping on orders of coins. So basically, order coins from the US Mint with a rewards credit card, then have them shipped for free to you, then take them to the bank immediately upon receiving them. No cost to you, and you rack up the points. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, I have a good one. I'd saved up a crap load of coins and I needed to get them counted. I went to a bank that I knew had a coin counter, mine didn't, and asked the staff if I could use it if I belonged to another bank. She said sure, so I did. It was about $800+ when all was counted. I took my slip to the counter and she asked if I had an account with them. I explained I didn't, but the lady at the front said I could use it. She comes over, B-word, and says she didn't realize I didn't have an account here. What the frick? I would need to pay 20% of all my coins total. I was fuming for about 5 seconds, then I turned to the teller and said, "I'd like to open an account, please." She was teed off, but she sent me to the other section to open an account. I deposited the money into my account, waited until I got my card, withdrew it, and went in and closed the account. It was a lengthy workaround, but it worked. 20%? Oh my god, I would have done that too. What a load of crap. Always wanted to tell people about this or write into Nintendo Power, and I never had the chance. This goes back to the days of Game Boy. I learned one day while playing Final Fantasy Adventure that you could max out your levels through a simple trick. 1. When one of your characters would gain a new level, do not move from your existing position and immediately save the game. 2. Then press B, A, Start, Select, which would cause the Game Boy to reset. 3. Load up the game where you saved and you will immediately get attacked by the same monster that you leveled up from last time. Upon killing him, the same character who got leveled up previously will level up again. Rinse, repeat. It's old and no one cares, but I feel like I finally got to spread the word on this one, and I can die happy. Winn-Dixie had Skittles buy one get one free. At the register, when you scanned a pack of sour Skittles, a manufacturer's coupon for a free bag of Skittles would come out of the register. So as long as they were separate transactions, you could use the cup from the previous transaction on the current one, so on and so forth. I bought a whole case of both, paying 12 cents for tax for each transaction. Most hotels will charge you if you cancel a booking within 48 hours of your scheduled stay. You can reschedule your booking for free though and move it outside of the 48-hour block and then cancel for free. This year, I have casually found a vending machine near my house that has a little bug. If I insert my money and repeatedly press the button for a Fanta, the machine gives me 2 Fanta instead of 1. Now I always go for that vending machine. It wasn't a loophole, but once at the airport I wanted some soda at the vending machine. I inserted the money and I didn't get 1 soda, I got 4. Like seriously, I was literally screaming to my friends, "I got 4 of these!" In the airport, I never won any lottery or whatever. Vending machines often don't want to give me the food I just bought. But that day, I was victorious. I'd beaten the machine. And now I have the image in my head of you chugging all of them next to an impatient TSA agent because he wouldn't let you bring them on the plane. My high school advanced algebra teacher had a system where you could retake an exam if you failed. Part of this was if you were to tutor someone who failed, and then subsequently passed because of your help, you'd get half of their improvement added to your score. So the smartest girl in the class and I took turns getting zeros on exams and then tutoring each other. When I was in elementary school, I took part in a paper airplane contest in which whoever's paper airplane flew the furthest won. We had unlimited pieces of paper at our disposal and about 10 minutes to craft our planes. I noticed some other kids had airplanes that flew quite a bit further than mine, but still not very far. So I basically crunched all of my failed planes into a dense paper ball and just chucked it. It went almost 4 times as far as my nearest competitor. We had the same project for a public administration class in college. The project was more about the other stuff that went along with it than the competition, but you got a big boost for winning it. There was no restriction on what materials could be used, just on the cost of the plane. We just wrapped paper around a baseball and had the college's starting pitcher, who was on our team, toss it. We got the credit, but so did second place, and my friend who took the class the following year said they had a lot more restrictions on their project. When our whole Algebra 2 class figured out how grading on a curve works and statistically used it to our advantage. Average grade in our finals was a 52%, so the whole class passed without really even trying on it. Went to Walmart to buy a shotgun which required proof of residency, and my driver's license had a P.O. box, so they wouldn't accept it. I asked what documents could be used as a proof of residency. Turns out a fishing license counts. Does Walmart sell fishing licenses at the same sporting goods desk? Yes, they do. Document needed to get a fishing license? A driver's license. A Walmart sporting goods associate filled out the paperwork for my fishing license, for which I provided my physical address and then handed it over to me. I handed it back and said, "Now, I'd like to purchase that shotgun." The look on their face was priceless, but a few minutes later, I walked out with it. Got a similar FU story from Disney World. We were at Epcot and it had been pouring rain all day. Mostly we'd just been hanging out under a pavilion. Finally, we decided to head back when it slacked up, but being Florida, it started pouring again. Ducked into the Mexican restaurant there to wait it out and get dinner. Asked the hostess for a table for 3. "I'm sorry, we're on reservations only tonight." "Okay, fine." I pulled out my phone and checked their website. Sure enough, they had a reservation open for that time. Quickly made the reservation, looked at the hostess and said, "Yes, reservation for 3, name of Sparkstalker." She just glared at me while I smiled like an idiot. My dad went to Walmart with my little brother to return a video game. The game was open, so they said he could only exchange the game for the same one. He says, okay, and gets a new unopened video game. He then, with game in hand, looks at the same person and says, I'd like to return this game, please. They actually let him do it. You know, of all the places that deserve to be gamed by multiple people repeatedly, Walmart is definitely up there. Let them have it. Back in middle school and high school, I was busted at home for looking at adult flicks. My parents had the MSN browser and internet service at the time. Their response was to ground me and change the password to get on the MSN account. This is during the years of dial-up. I discovered that I could type in any random digits into the password space to allow MSN to start the dial-up process and then minimize the window. The computer would connect to the internet, but not the MSN account. I would then open Internet Explorer and browse to my heart and hand's content, erase the internet history, and they were none the wiser. When Radio Shack had open locations nearby, I'd buy cheap $8 to $10 earbuds, and later cheap $10 to $20 pairs of over-ear headphones and get a warranty on them. Whether it was the quality of the stuff or me being an idiot, these would never last me more than a month or two, so I'd go back, buy the same pair for a huge discount thanks to the warranty, and put a new warranty on those. Repeat, get $2 to $3 sets of earbuds and headphones forever. Or at least until all the Radio Shacks near me closed down. I guess this is kind of a loophole? One of my proudest moments nonetheless. In the final semester of my senior year in high school, I decided to take a class called Physics 2. I liked the first physics class I took. I thought this would be a fun class to go out on. Wrong. It was basically AP Physics. I was in way over my head. It's just that physics was a subject I couldn't easily understand. I failed a lot of tests. At the end of the semester, I had a D- going into the final. I'm freaking out at this point, thinking that my college acceptance is going to be pulled. Our final project is about buoyancy. The task is to build a boat that could support you and your partner out of nothing but cardboard, glue, and 20 feet of duct tape. If you could paddle to the end of a pool and back with you and your partner in the boat, you get an A on that aspect of the project. Great! Then my teacher made the mistake of offering extra incentive. For every length of the pool you could go beyond that without sinking, you'd get 40 extra credit points. Extra credit was my only hope. We went out and found the sturdiest cardboard we could find. We carefully folded, glued, and cut the cardboard into a canoe-type boat. It looked great. The day finally came, my entire class brought their boats out and we started. Most people made it to the end of the pool before their boats started to disintegrate. One group made it back and forth 13 times before they sank. Whoa! We were the very last team. We go in and start paddling. We make it to the end and paddle back. Then out and back again, and again, and again. We crossed the pool 60 times before our teacher made us stop. We didn't sink, and we both earned 2,400 extra credit points. I went from a D- to an A on the very last final I ever had in school. True story and one of my greatest days. When I was in high school, we figured out that we could use the Hooked on Phonics automated toll-free number to make free phone calls from payphones. We would dial 1-800-ABC-DEFG, and once prompted, we would enter 1, 2, 3, 4 3 times. The calls would then drop and we would get a dial tone, and then could call anyone we wanted to. Probably saved a good $4.75 with that one. Several years back, McDonald's started offering free Big Macs if you went online and completed a survey. At the end of the survey, the site would give you a coupon code, write the code onto the receipt, and the receipt becomes a coupon for a free Big Mac. A few years ago, I made 2 back-to-back purchases, thus getting 2 receipts. After completing both surveys, I was given the same coupon code for both receipts, and both of them worked at the register. I got 2 free Big Macs. Over time and with some casual experimentation, I realized that the coupon codes didn't seem to expire. I started saving a few bucks by finding discarded McDonald's receipts on the ground, writing the code on it, and getting a free Big Mac. It's been about 3 years since I made this discovery, and the coupon code still works. I haven't paid for a Big Mac in 3 years. Walgreens was running a deal on a blood sugar monitor that was originally $19.99. They had a weekly deal where it dropped down to $9.99, plus you got 2,000 points free on your Balance reward card. I found a coupon for that exact meter which got me $10 off, so the meter became free. Plus I got $2 in balance points. I have about 20 meters sitting in my house that will be going to a lower income clinic where people who need it but can't afford it will benefit the most from it. This site that delivers pretty good quality frozen food had a really good temporary sign-up deal. Put $50 of food in your cart, sign up with a new account, and they'd take $30 off plus free shipping. This stacked with the current deals like 4 packages of filled pasta for $5 and massive frick-off chocolate cake plus liter of ice cream plus raspberries for $20. I've moved out of home but only 5 to 10 minutes away from my parents. Either the place didn't notice or didn't care that the same credit card placed 2 orders for 2 different names and addresses. That cake was great. What's the biggest dating WTF that you've ever experienced? Had a Tinder date and the guy bought his girlfriend and asked for a threesome without saying a word about it in advance. I gotta wonder how many times he's tried that and what the success rate is. I'm choosing to believe that he didn't even tell the girlfriend about it in advance. He just turned up and said, "Ladies, I've got a proposition for you." Girl told me within 15 minutes of our first meeting that she was doing the deed with a married coworker, and her favorite part was seeing him cry with guilt after it was over. Holy crap, not only doing that but bringing it up on a date 15 minutes in. This is the first comment that actually makes me really mad. Yeah, usually something you bring up on the second date. I think I would literally just get up and leave without saying a word, like I'd never seen her before. 1. She was so wrapped up in her phone that she didn't notice I'd moved over and started a conversation with some other guests. 2. Asked if she could bring a friend to feel safe, completely understandable, and I was fine with it. She brought her best friend and her date. Both girls ignored us pretty much all night and we left without them. He turned out to be a pretty cool guy though, and he invited me to join for weekend football, where I made even more friends. Maybe she just wanted free food. I've heard stories of people that meet online and go on dates and their date just doesn't interact with them. Like one-word answers, on their phone, no eye contact, orders anything they want, being rude, etc. I once got catfished on Tinder. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? This person had me meet them and acted as if they were not a different person. One of the craziest experiences of my life. You got catfished and gaslighted at the same time? Gasfished? Catlighted? Gatflished. A girl I'd been seeing for a couple of weeks or so asked me to go with her to a funeral of some guy that I didn't know. What I didn't expect was that the funeral was for her fiancé. I got out of there real quick once I realized why everyone was shooting me glares the whole time. I was the side piece. This story is just so wildly uncomfortable and horrifying that if I ever accompany a date to a funeral, I'm going to be checking in advance to see if the venue has a built-in ejector seat for the guests before I confirm. If anything, they should have been shooting her those glares. Who brings a date to their fiancé's funeral? My wife likes to ask me silly questions like, "Would you cry at my funeral?" To curb this one, my response was, "Well, I wouldn't want to look like a B-word in front of my new girlfriend." I'm quite proud of this one. Beehive Girl. She had a Marge Simpson hairdo about 18 inches high. She was an actor and couldn't understand why roles would demand that she cut her hair, so she turned them down. I went on 3 dates with her just to hear her stories. She was totally oblivious that she was the problem. It was like I was watching a soap opera or something, but she was serious. This could be a pretty amazing Seinfeld episode. I went on a Tinder date with this one girl whose bio said something like, "You won't like me, I'm a disaster." Spoiler alert, she was right. But she was pretty attractive, so we went to get tea at a local hipster joint. She was obviously depressed. She told me about her hyper-competent other personality that she sometimes slips into and how her current life goal was to move several states away from her family and work at a gas station, even though she was a senior bio major. As the date was ending, she freaked out, saying that she forgot her backpack in her last class but doesn't have a car to get back. Apparently her mum dropped her off and then went home, half an hour away in the suburbs. So I took her to get her backpack, then she told me that she needed me to drive to her house because it was late and no bus was running there. So I drove her half an hour back to her parents' house in the suburbs. On the way, she told me that she actually has a boyfriend, but sometimes she likes to see what's out there, and that this is what our date was. Oh, and she's also pretty sure she's a lesbian, but likes the power involved in getting a guy to like her. For some reason, we never saw each other again. That's a pretty good example of the term crappy person. The setup for the comeback is real though. Too bad it didn't work out this time, huh? Drop her at the curb? How did you keep from dumping her at the closest 7-Eleven and heading for a bar? At least you're not the boyfriend, so I guess life could have been worse. I had a guy ask me out on a date and he suggested a Japanese restaurant I liked. After I ordered, the server asked him what he wanted and he said he wasn't hungry. I asked him if he wanted to wait until he was hungry, but he said no, he just wanted to watch me eat. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but his expression said he wasn't joking. The sushi was good though. Because people are asking, I paid for my food at the end and he didn't offer. If he paid, I would have felt crazy guilty rather than being weirded out. No second date, I take it. Nope, but my relationship with that Japanese restaurant is still going strong. This guy went on and on about how he hated promiscuity and whores. Later on that night, he tried to go up my shirt and touch my chest. I stopped him and said, I thought you hated promiscuity. Oh, he was using code for, I hate girls that won't sleep with me. My ex in high school asked me to shave every last hair on my body, like everything except for my eyebrows. I refused, so she dumped me. She's now married to a guy with alopecia. No joke. Hey, I guess there's someone out there for everyone. But they don't have eyebrows. She's probably still hunting for the perfect mate. Could always Sharpie those bad boys on. I think I was like 17 or 18 at the time. We were fooling around. He starts suckling on me and says, in a baby voice, "Baby, what's his milky?" I really hope you busted out laughing. This sounds like a green text. Oh my god. Just told my husband this story recently when we were driving around the town we grew up in and reminiscing about our teen years. There was a guy who I'd seen around town, usually across the street from a bus stop I used often, that I thought was super cute. I wound up meeting him a couple of years later at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. And he was cool, and remembered me from that bus stop. Apparently he had been into me from afar as well. And we decided to move to the front of the house to speak privately and possibly make out. Well, he was super drunk, and we talked and sat next to each other on the front steps, and as the conversation dwindled and our faces moved closer to kiss, inches away from each other, he turns and vomits like a fire hose between his legs. I tried to comfort him a bit and then went back to the party and left shortly after. He felt terrible and asked me out later, and I said, frick it, let's not totally blow this guy off. Everyone gets super drunk sometimes, sure. But his idea of a date was taking me to a graveyard in broad daylight to get drunk, and I realized he was very, very dumb, and I never spoke to him again. I was 17, my boyfriend was 20 or 21. We were out to dinner at a fancy place with his parents. He loudly turned to me and said, by the way, since you won't sleep with me, I'm banging other girls. With his parents inches away. That dinner became incredibly awkward after that. To clarify, I was a virgin and not ready yet. Could I just say if that was my 21-year-old son, I'd spank him like a freaking toddler over the table. If it was my son, I would have sent him home and enjoyed the fancy dinner with his ex-girlfriend. Well, enjoyed is a strong word, it would probably still be awkward. I once went on a date where I probably said like 5 words. Girl just talked for over an hour and a half without ever including me in the conversation. Just reminisced, complained, and bragged about her life for over 90 minutes straight. I was so taken aback that I just kind of drove home wondering if that experience was real or not. Not a date, but this reminds me of one of my girlfriend's friends. She kept telling my girlfriend how she wanted to meet me and all that. Had a dinner. Not a single question was asked by her. It was all about her and her mother and her weird racist tangent about how she, a white woman, couldn't see Black Panther in her home state of North Carolina for fear of being jumped and mugged by the black people in attendance. I would actually hazard a guess that the woman in question may not have had many friends due to her, let's say, garrulousness and crappy opinions, and was looking forward to meeting the new boyfriend because it meant someone she would have a free pass to run her mouth with and have him not walk out because he didn't want to annoy his date. In my junior college days, had a girl invite me over for a study date. Her dad was home and we actually studied at the kitchen table. Dad seemed cool from the little conversation we had. Aside from a 7-Eleven run for snacks and cigs, her dad was 10 feet away from us the whole time. I thought the date went well, we talked more than we studied, made tentative plans to see a movie. Couple of days later, I texted her, "What's your weekend looking like so we can check out a flick? Grab some dinner." She replies back it's not going to work, she wants someone more forceful. I was like, what? Apparently her running to her bedroom a few times for things she forgot was her hint to me that I was supposed to follow and pounce, I guess. I was very new to the city and ended up setting up a date with a girl off Tinder. I spent a lot of time looking into cool bars and suggested a bunch to her, but she ended up really wanting to go to a certain bar, like wouldn't take no for an answer. I looked it up, it looked okay, nothing really that special. I figured she had some sort of thing with the people who worked there where she could escape if the date went bad. Fast forward to the date, it's going really well, she's absolutely gorgeous, and the conversation is really easy. I bring up the choice of bar and why she was so adamant on this one. She said her ex-boyfriend works there, and that threw me off, but I figured they broke up a while ago now and are just friends. So I questioned further, asking how long ago they broke up, and she tells me 2 weeks ago, and that he is currently our bartender. I look over at the bar, and this massive 280-pound guy is giving me the biggest death stare. I was wondering all night why he was being such a prick to me, and now I understood. I got out of there pretty quickly after that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A guy I saw for less than a month, if I recall correctly, took it upon himself to vent any problems relating to the relationship that we had to a male friend of mine he didn't really know well at all. In retrospect, he was a peculiar guy in many different ways, and this hampered his ability to make his own friends to whom he could vent and get advice from. At the time, however, it was incredibly strange for my friend, who explicitly told him several times, "Dude, Sheila's my friend, not you. I have no idea who you are. Please don't come to me with complaints about her." I think it took about 4 or 5 tries and my dumping of him for him to understand it. Some guy took my glasses, ran out of the restaurant with them, and I got a text like 15 minutes later of him taking a selfie in them at his place. He said if I wanted them back, I would have to come over to his place. Holy crap, what a butthole. Did you mention an alternative of, or the police could come and get them? I honestly really should have done that. This was while I was in the Marines. I met up with this girl from POF, all seemed well from our chats and texting, so we decided to meet up for a date in Palm Springs. Nothing out there yet. I get there to find out she has kids, which she has brought along but never told me about having kids whatsoever, and without missing a beat, she asks me right there to have a contract marriage. I spit my drink out ASAP while she tried to explain how it would benefit the both of us. I just looked at her with a stern look, told her to get her crap together, told her to lose my number, and walked the frick out. Hey baby, want some TRICARE? She is the textbook definition of a dependent. She had previously told me how irresponsible her sister was. Her sister received a positive result for herpes. Sister thought it meant she was clean and didn't have it. I don't get the logic either. A few weeks later, we'd been seeing each other pretty casually, and she mentions that her sister wanted to swap. Yeah, no thanks. On a 3rd or 4th date, I went back to his apartment to have a glass of wine. We had a great evening until near the end he said, "Wow, I can't believe you passed almost every test." Turns out he set up his apartment with small girlfriend tests. He made sure there was little to no toilet paper to see if I would change the roll, if I rinsed my dishes, if I turned out the lights behind me, where I put my jacket and shoes, etc. Needless to say, there were no further dates. That was no man. That's his mother wearing his skin, testing you. This gave me a chill. Like, he just couldn't wait to reveal his master plan? That he'd put her through the gauntlet of girlfriend material tests? Yeah, major D-bag. Now, setting up 1 or 2 of those small tests in and of itself isn't inherently terrible and will make for a nice story a couple of weeks or months later, but in fact that, for him, the whole date seemed to revolve around those tests is a red flag. The secret final test is to have her fight his ex. Not major, online match, meet for dinner. She tells me she's lactose intolerant, proceeds to order food with lots of dairy products. The restaurant was small and in an old house, so the bathroom was the single closet style that happened to be less than 10 feet from our table. Her food upset her, so she uses that loudly and leaves the door open after she's done. Yep. Still asks if we can go get ice cream afterwards. Ugh, that girl likes to party. I'd been dating this guy for about a month. I knew he was pretty freshly out of another relationship. We were having beers on a patio at a tap house nearby, and his phone rings and he answers it and proceeds to talk to who I realized was his ex. They were arguing and talking about their breakup, all while he was sitting at the table with me. After about an hour and a few beers later, a guy at the table next to me gave me a kind of nod to join his table. I did. We talked about what an idiot the other guy was being. We spent the next couple of hours chatting, D-bag left when his phone call was over, and my new friend and I ended up dating for a year, and we're still friends to this day. I've been on and off the dating app life for a couple of years now. I just got my first big boy job and moved to a new area. I matched with this cute girl who was a junior in a college nearby. We had a nice first date, got coffee and walked around. We set up plans to grab lunch that weekend. During lunch, we decided to go on an impromptu hike. I drove us to my house to grab some water, snacks, change clothes, and we had a nice hike. Everything was going pretty darn well. We texted and kept up throughout the week. That Friday, I was at a friend's house. We had a few drinks, so I didn't feel comfortable driving back home. He didn't have an Android charger and my phone was dying, so I sent a courtesy text to let her know I was going to be out of commission for a while. The next morning, I get home and charge in my phone. After a few seconds, I get a slew of text messages, around 50, all from her. It was a spiral into insanity. At first, she told me to have fun and have a good night. Then it went to, "Hey, are you free?" to, "Why aren't you talking to me?" And near the latter, she mentioned she drove to my house and didn't see my car. She accused me of sleeping around. Basically, any and every insecurity got projected onto me within a couple of hours, all while I was asleep. I called it off immediately. She probably had some deeper issues, and I hope she's gotten help or is happy. It was just the transition from a few nice dates to that night that made me really take a step back and go, what the actual frick? People who do this think your complicated feelings through, condense them into a concise message, or sleep on it and leave it at that. You're only going to drive folks away with your walls of text. Case in point, my ex was kinda like this. She was totally normal until she had a lot of personal issues happen all at once, and just kind of lost her crap after about 2 to 3 years of normal dating. I can't have my phone on me at work a lot. Sometimes I'd turn it on at the end of the day and it would start with, "Hi, how are you?" and progress into, "Are you actually at work?" and, "Oh my god, you'd better not be with someone else, you fricking hussy." And she'd eventually work herself back to calm and be like, "I'm just so crazy sometimes, that's why you love me." Hint: this does not make someone love you. She did this about once a week along with other crazy crap like spying on all my texts and Facebook messages and harassing my female friends. I finally broke up with her when she refused to get any therapy. The last fight we had was her screaming at me about how dare I get my master's degree before her, and I clearly did it on purpose to make her feel worse about her life. To clarify, I did struggle to keep our relationship intact for almost 2 more years of full-on crazy psycho behavior, but there's only so much crap you can take before it starts affecting your own mental health as well. And also, for the record, it did make me realize that all these women I knew who were in terrible relationships that I was, like, she should just leave them. Yeah, now I realize it's not actually that easy when you love someone. Oh my god, I used to be like this. It's like relationship PTSD. It happens when you've gotten gaslighted or cheated on, or have a few other things happen to you that leave you with trust issues. I did a lot of therapy that only marginally helped. It got better only after I was in a stable relationship for a little while, where my partner provided strong boundaries like, "I understand where you're coming from, but here's what behavior I will accept and which ones I won't accept." Staying within that structure means now it's downgraded to minor freakouts and play wrestling when they won't tell me what they're laughing about on their phone. I said something the guy I was dating at the time didn't like, so to punish me, he punched himself 3 times in the jaw and knocked out a tooth. A year ago, I met up with a girl I met on a dating site. We went out for coffee and had a good talk about movies and video games. Then, everything got weird and she asked if she could read me some of her poetry about her ex-boyfriend cheating on her. She proceeded to sob in public in the middle of the poem and wouldn't stop until she was finished with her very long poem, despite being a blubbering, sniffling mess. There was no second date. Her next date heard her poems about her date with the guy who didn't like poetry. Her date after that was easier because she could just reuse the poems from the previous date. On 2 separate occasions, I've gone home with the guy after a perfectly lovely first date to find an array of adult bedroom toys laid out on the bed, ready for use. Don't get me wrong, I'm generally down, but you can't just spring that on someone, guys. There has to be a discussion before you bring out a leather hood and a Flogotron 3000. In both cases, there was no second date. He made me Uber to him, $20 one way to a nice building, so we could Uber together to a bar by my condo. Cost me $40 to go somewhere 2 blocks from my place. I don't get it. He then pulled a pint of Svedka out and chugged it in one shot at the bar. He ordered 2 drinks and shoved me the bill. He hit on the bartender in a language I don't speak. She was very uncomfortable. He then asked me where I lived. Told him the name of the building. He decided that he liked my building better than his and wanted to stay with me for a few days to check it out and buy a penthouse. I said no, but he could contact a realtor. He went bat-crap crazy. I looked down and he's on Tinder while screaming at me. He showed me a girl and said he was going to frick her if I didn't let him in. I told him to go for it, I'm not interested. He followed me the whole walk to my place, stumbling, grabbing my arm and screaming at me. He tried to steal my purse. The police ended up coming up to me and holding him long enough for me to get home. He sent me a series of bizarre threatening messages that night and kept randomly messaging me that he loved me, I'm a B-word, I'm his only hope, he was going to have his way with me against my will. I posted about it on Facebook and some other friends had run-ins with him. Guess he's homeless and was getting by staying at people's houses and borrowing their stuff to look like he's somewhat wealthy to con more people. If I'd let him in, I'd have been screwed. It was a crap show of events for a first date. Here's the short version of an insanely crazy date. Took a girl out hiking. She bought a machete. She stripped down into the buff and started whacking through the foliage with her blade, and then got mad at me and threw roadkill at me. Have you ever witnessed a bride or groom say, "I do not," at a wedding? While working in the wedding industry for over 17 years, we've hosted on average 140 weddings per year. 10+ years ago, we had a wedding and the groom and his groomsmen arrived, taking pictures, joking around, guests all arrived, took their seats, and about 5 minutes before the wedding was supposed to start, the bride's limo pulled up to the chapel. The bride's father got out, walked inside the chapel, walked to the microphone and stated the wedding was called off. His daughter would not be getting married today. He directed myself and my staff to still feed and liquor up all the guests since he'd already paid for all 170 people and got back into the limo and left. I never heard what the reason was, but that was by far the most awkward event I ever managed. It was a joke, but he was too nervous and it didn't really work. Everyone that heard him called him a jackass that ruined his own wedding. I was humiliated for him. I was in attendance where the pastor says, "Repeat after me, for better or for worse," and the groom said, "For better and for better." Everyone chuckled, but there was a hint of honesty there. They divorced after 9 months. I had a friend who decided to have a whole staged scene at this moment, with a mini soap opera playing out in the middle of the wedding. A mutual friend who was pregnant stood up and said that the baby was the groom's, and her husband flipped out. All the wedding party had scripted lines like, "Shut up, Susan, you know you lost your chance with him after the disappearance of your mysterious twin sister." The bride and groom were all in on it. It took the rest of the people only a few lines to realize that this was a joke. Fun was had by all, until about 3 months later when the soap opera actually happened and she cheated on him with his friend. Groom said, "I don't." Awkward silence and then, "Ha, it was a joke," followed by a longer, more awkward silence. "Pranked ya." Yes, at my cousin's wedding. The bride suddenly backed out at the last second. The wedding was abruptly cancelled and we, the family of the groom, all went to a restaurant instead. The bride was kind of a B-word who was abusive towards my cousin and extorts him for his money, so we were all relieved that this happened. I guess bullet dodged, I suppose? Shame about the literal tens of thousands of dollars they'd probably spent up to that point, but what can you do? One of the times my father went to the altar after my mum had divorced him. He was what you'd call a serial groom. In any event, the wedding was being hosted at someone's house and they got in front of the minister and decided not to get married. But they were both drunks and there was a lot of booze stocked up and why let it all go to waste? So they decided to get crap show drunk and have a party. I don't remember her name as it would have been his 5th marriage at the time. He eventually hit marriage number 5, walked away from an engagement one more time and was engaged yet again when he died. Not exactly that, but an acquaintance of mine was getting married. A few days before the wedding, they realized they weren't going to make it as a couple. However, because everything was paid for, they agreed to go through with it. Apparently, they fooled people quite well, as a friend who was invited told me that they looked so in love, but I knew it was just an act. A few months later, they quietly went their separate ways. So I'm guessing they never signed anything to make the marriage official, they just had a party. That's a safe bet. Getting married takes paperwork, so if you just don't submit it, you're off the hook. My cousin did this, actually unbeknownst to his then-wife. They moved to a different state right after the ceremony and were going to file the paperwork there, and things immediately got kind of rocky. My cousin decided to just not submit the paperwork and didn't tell his wife. He kept trying to make it work. I think he did love her, but knew that she wasn't all in. When the wife finally decided to ask for a divorce about 6 months later, he was like, "Guess what? We don't have to pay." Before anyone goes, "Oh my god, what a prick," yes, my cousin is notoriously a D-bag, but he wasn't trying to screw her over or anything either. She had a lot of mental health problems, and in hindsight, their lives needed to go in different directions. My cousin paid for her to resettle back home and finish her college degree while he did his own thing. My buddy was so nervous he blurted out, "I do," the first time the priest addressed him. Same thing happened at my cousin's wedding. It got a pretty good laugh from everybody, bride and groom got embarrassed and red-faced, and the bride continued to giggle from nervousness throughout the entire thing up until the actual I do's and kiss. Just adorable all round. Saw a guy who was too drunk to even say "I do." Amazingly, they went through with it. Split up 6 months later. Turns out he'd cheated on the bride the night before. Stay classy. There's no better way to celebrate the most important day of your relationship than by getting so drunk you don't remember any of it. I was at a wedding where the bride didn't turn up. Was horribly awkward whilst the groom just refused to agree that she wasn't coming. We all sat there for over an hour waiting. We were taken through for drinks, and the groom and main members of the wedding party disappeared. Apologies were made by the staff, dinner was served for anyone who'd stuck around, and then we all went home. Bride had freaked out. Apparently she did still want to get married, but the groom refused to go through it all again. They're still together though. Yeah, the pastor got the bride's name wrong. The groom was like, "I do not." All was well though, everyone got a pretty good laugh out of it. Highlight of the entire ceremony. I know a wedding manager and he only witnessed it once, but the groom meant it as a joke. He had some sort of bet going. The bride got mad and ran out of church. I just picture this annoying 90s groom. "I do not." Then grinning and looking around for approval. It's pretty much Ace Ventura doing this in my mind. "Dude, it was a joke. Come back." Here in the Netherlands, if you say no, or maybe, or anything else that's not clearly an affirmation, even if it's clearly meant as a joke, the wedding is off, and the person leading the ceremony is legally obligated to leave the premise to make sure the wedding cannot be legally completed. This is to prevent forced marriages. All the bride or the groom has to do to make sure they're not getting married is to say no briefly. Nobody can force the marriage to continue after that. So in the Netherlands, the guy would have ruined the entire day and thus deserved all of the crap the bride could give him. I was at a wedding officiated by an ancient Catholic priest. He muddled his way through the ceremony but seemed to fall into the regular Sunday Mass rhythm, forgetting that this was a wedding. Eventually he started to say the "Our Father" in one of the last parts of the ceremony. The congregation, following along on our ceremony booklets, realizes something is wrong and start to rustle uncomfortably. Eventually, the best man went up to the priest and whispered in his ear. The priest was startled and muttered, "Oh, I forgot about that part." He then went on to ask the bride and groom if they actually wanted to get married. They both said, "I do." Next, he forgot the "You may kiss the bride" line, so we all waited uncomfortably again until my friend shouted, "Kiss!" They kissed, we clapped, and they all lived happily ever after. In conclusion, old priest forgets to ask bride and groom if they wanted to get married. They did. Not exactly. The couple was so emotional that they just couldn't answer. They're the sweetest of people who were burned so badly in previous marriages that when things finally went right for them, they both broke down a little. The priest made a little joke about love, let them calm down, and started that part of the ceremony all over again. I know it's not exactly "I do not," but when my parents got married and the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," my dad said, "Do I have to?" At my wedding, when the pastor was done talking, he was like, "Steve, you can go ahead. Give her a kiss." It sounded freaking stupid, and I felt robbed that I didn't get the usual "You may kiss the bride" line. One of my friends is so uncomfortable with public affection that she and her husband high-fived instead of kissing. My aunt was with an abusive butthole and decided not to go through on the day of, and didn't show up. My grandfather went up and stood on the stage and said something along the lines of, "There won't be a wedding tonight, but stay for dinner and drinks on me." Maybe that contributed to a 100% more jovial atmosphere at the reception, if the woman was that unpleasant to be around. Hope the groom was okay though. Not my story, but I heard about a friend of my ex-girlfriend getting married about 3 days before the wedding. The girl her fiancé was cheating on her with showed up at her door. She was crying hysterically and said, "I can't let you marry him. He's been cheating on you for 2 years. Please don't marry him." But it got colder from there. The girl went through with everything until it was time for the vows, and when it was her turn to say "I do," she clasped her hands and said, "I do not." Everyone kind of uncomfortably chuckled, going, I wonder if they rehearsed this. When she goes, "I do not marry the man who has lied to my face for 2 years. I do not marry the man who crept out of my bedroom when I was asleep to the neighbor's apartment to crawl into bed with her. I do not marry the man who stands here with me, humiliating me, my friends, and my family on what was supposed to be my special day. I do not, in the eyes of the church, forgive this man nor take him to be mine. It seemed like the story was going to come to a head, but apparently she just walked away crying and none of the guests knew what to make of it all. Apparently there was tremendous confusion. As a wedding DJ, something like this is a personal nightmare of mine. I frequently play music for the ceremony and processional, and I would have no idea what to play after a scene like this. Maybe just some light jazz while everyone gathers their wits. Yes, my own sister did this at her wedding. She was marrying this guy basically just for his money, and she apparently found out his business was failing, and he was no longer a millionaire a few weeks before the ceremony. She wanted to embarrass him, so she did not call it off right away and dropped the bomb at the last second. Sounds like she's an awful human being. She is. Tell her I hate her. Thanks. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not even close to the same, but at my wedding I spaced out while the officiant was talking. When it got time for I do, I was just staring blankly out the window. My now wife got my attention, and I had to ask what was going on. I said, I do. We didn't practice that part, sorry. This is adorable. My best friend got married recently, and the groom was staring out the window while the officiant was talking, and suddenly made a really shocked and scared face, and started to look panicked, and clearly wasn't listening. I was really concerned, but the rest of the ceremony went fine, and it turns out he realized in that moment he had forgotten a piece of the paper he needed during the ceremony. From this, we can discover grooms, and men in relationships generally, could benefit from discreetly well-placed teleprompters. Now there is a business model. I've been at a wedding where the bride basically said no, I don't submit to my husband. They had to ask the officiant not to use any of that language when exchanging vows. He obviously didn't listen and she just crossed her arms and said, no, I do not, when that part of the vows came about. They still got married and as far as I know, they live happily together. That whole wedding weekend was a circus from beginning to end. I knew a guy here in Pittsburgh whose bride just didn't show up. He decided to go around and invite some local homeless folks to feed them with the catering he'd paid for. He's a fairly wealthy dude, so I'm sure the food was no fire hall special either. Crappy thing, but a hell of a guy. Never, but my sister did mess up her lines. She got so nervous it took 10 minutes. The do comes after I. The confusion is understandable. Pretty close. My ex-father-in-law, a retired judge, was officiant at a friend's wedding. They wrote their own vows and didn't run them by him beforehand, but I can't remember exactly how they went. It was something like, with me, you will never be alone. Together, you need not fear sickness or loss. I won't ever leave your side. When they were done, he said, I'm sorry, I can't accept those vows. Legally speaking, I need a clear and affirmative statement of consent from both of you. And you phrased everything as a negative. Do you want to be married? Please answer in a clear, articulated statement of affirmative consent. They both said, I do, and had a little laugh, and that was that. They were married. Not me, but an old high school friend who was cheating before her wedding was getting married and lightning hit the steeple right after they said their vows. Falling rock damaged some cars parked on the street next to the church. They lasted about a year. I kept a piece of the steeple for a long time and then tossed it a few years later when I realized it was probably bad luck. I want to believe the piece of steeple had a purpose. It washed up on a beach somewhere where another troubled couple were honeymooning, became a murder weapon, went on its way to many great home-wrecking adventures, but only the doomed ones. I would binge-watch that series. Yes, but it was purely a mistake. But before the bride could process what she had said, the man passed out and hit his head on a church pew, splitting it wide open. The wedding was stopped and his head was sewn up after it was revealed that the bride indeed made a mistake. Needless to say, the groom was on pain meds and hitting the alcohol did not help. It was all a big laugh afterwards, same couple still married. 15 to 20 years now. When I was getting married, the officiant, clerk at the courthouse, an older gentleman who had been in the business long enough to marry my parents, asked me if I would take my wife to be my wife. After I said I do, he then turned to her and asked, and do you take John to be your wife? To which she smiled, not skipping a beat, and said, I take him to be my husband, yes. There was a pause where the clerk looked at her funny and then he covered his face. I said wife, didn't I? There was a nice round of laughter for us and our immediate family and friends, followed by his sincerest apologies. I'm constantly reminded I'm the most handsome wife in the world. This isn't an I do not situation, but at my wedding, my officiant, embarrassingly, confused me by asking questions like, will you take care of your wife forever? Will you hold her dear? Will you support her? Typical wedding questions? So I looked at my wife and said, I will. I immediately realized my mistake and stammered out, I do. I felt like an idiot, but hey, my wife gave me her right hand instead of her left for the wedding ring, so it all balanced out. I don't know if this was horrifically awkward from an audience perspective or a wedding full of cute rom-com-esque mistakes. I think it could have seemed either way. I seriously felt like saying it, but I didn't have the cojones. Fights started in the honeymoon and marriage lasted 1.3 years. If you feel like saying it on your wedding day, do it. It's so much easier than navigating a divorce. No, but almost. I made a Princess Bride reference when we were sitting down with our officiant for the first time. We chuckled and he never mentioned it again. Until the wedding day, he did the whole bit. Marriage is what brings us together today. And so on. The whole speech. My family was cracking up, but neither she nor her family have ever seen the movie. Honestly, I thought I was going to go to bed drunk and single that night. My now husband started fidgeting during the sermonettes leading up to the exchanging of the vows. The minister asked if we were ready to exchange them, and he said, "Not yet." They didn't capture my reaction, nor did they get my daughters holding back my, in full dress blues, marine son. He leaned towards the minister and said he forgot the rings in the car. His son, who was taping the wedding, ran out and got them. My father-in-law yelled out, "He didn't get that from me." Afterwards, the minister and the wedding planner said that it had never happened before. Neither one asked my husband beforehand because he seemed so calm. Not at the wedding, but at the rehearsal dinner the night before. Bride and groom's mother got into a fight out in the front of the restaurant. The groom said, "I'm not marrying you until you apologize to my family and promise you'll fix this." The bride refused, groom called off the marriage. Bride decided to still have the reception and slept with the groom's roommate. Come to find out later she was only marrying him for his parents' money. Safe to say the groom dodged a bullet. This comes from a fellow I know who photographed weddings. The groom, at the reception, after the wedding ceremony, giving his groom's speech to a packed reception hall, thanks the best man for sleeping with his wife the night before and walks out. I was in a wedding party that got super close to derailing. We coordinated a meet-up before the ceremony for wedding pictures near some train tracks in an unfamiliar city. The groom didn't do the best job of communicating to the bride the actual location, causing the bride's side to be late. This sent the bride into a fit of rage, saying such colourful phrases as, "You always do this, I hate you," to, "I'm calling off the fricking wedding." This made for an incredibly awkward first look, mind you. While the bride was screaming bloody murder, the groom was off in the distance with his head down and back turned to us. Within moments, I got a text from him stating that he'd just adjusted his fantasy football lineup and was good to go. Pictures commenced and the wedding went off with a few more major hitches, including the bride crying and almost backing out moments before the walk. They expect their first child soon. I did see a couple signing marriage papers at the municipal building in my county, and then he decided after she signed that he wasn't really interested in being married. They talked it out, he got water dumped on him, and we all got a show. No, but I've seen someone object when the priest asked, did anyone have a reason as to why the marriage shouldn't go forth, and it was my drunk, troublemaking cousin who professed her love for the groom. She got thrown out. "I hope you were related to the bride." Not at the ceremony, but after the rehearsal dinner the night before, the bride saw the groom dancing with all her bridesmaids at the bar. Seemed like normal fun drunk stuff, but she flipped out and made a giant scene. Ended up sitting in the back seat of my car, my wife was in the wedding, bawling and refusing to talk to the groom. After like 30 seconds of people trying to talk sense into her, she told us to take her to her parents' house. We get there, take her inside, and leave. The next morning we find out the wedding is off. Apparently, the groom came over and she yelled at him, said she didn't love him, didn't want to go through with the wedding. The groom finally said, "Okay, fine." Then she turned it into, "He called off the wedding," and became the victim. She ended up keeping the gigantic ring, going on the expensive honeymoon with a friend, while her parents had to eat the cost of the ceremony and reception because it was too late to cancel. Rumors were it was around $50K. That afternoon, they brought around pieces of the wedding cake to everyone so it wouldn't go to waste. Our read on it was the bride never wanted to go through with it and this was her way out. I knew none of these people, so for me it was like watching a Jerry Springer episode. Me and another guy who no one knew just sat back and watched it all unfold, going, "This is awesome." The worst/best I've seen in person was a bride saying, "I need a minute," leaving and then coming back a minute later to say "I do." I was thoroughly confused, but it turns out she had been engaged before, and that man had died in a violent accident, and some memories came flooding back. My husband said, "Do I have to?" when he was asked to say his vows. The judge said, "Do it or you aren't getting married today." He did it. My husband thinks he's funny. He's not. During the rehearsal dinner, I said, "Yabba dabba doo!" I was at a destination wedding where the bride called it off the night before. It was an awkward vacation for the two families for the rest of the week. One of the resort guests, not related to the wedding, wrote about it in their TripAdvisor review. I used to be a bartender and once had a rehearsal dinner where the groom found out that his younger brother, also a groomsman, had lost his virginity to the bride-to-be. The details of when the act had happened never made it to me, and despite my best detective work, I was never able to figure out whether or not the wedding actually went through. In my 16 years as a wedding photographer, I never had a "I don't" moment, but I did see many grooms and brides show up extremely late and very drunk. I had a lesbian couple break up on their honeymoon because one of them fooled around with the masseuse, and I had two couples break up the day before the wedding for cheating, and one bride that stumbled down the aisle after taking 3 Xanax with champagne. There are so many more. Oh, the stories I could tell. What's the worst case of helicopter parents that you've ever seen? I had a friend in middle or high school who was a Chinese girl adopted by an old white couple who were super weird and overprotective. Some of the things I remember about her parents: Mum volunteered at whatever school we were at and would sit with us at lunch to make sure her daughter was eating. They drove a minivan and made her sit in a car seat in the very back row until like freshman year of high school. Anytime someone praised them for raising such a good daughter, they would laugh and say, "She's not our daughter, she's adopted." They wouldn't let her ride the school bus, join any clubs, or hang out with anyone after school. When she got her driver's license, the dad brought light sticks, like air traffic controller sticks. Anytime she left the house, he would stand in the street with his light sticks and blocked traffic so that people wouldn't hit her as she backed out of the driveway. It was hilarious to watch, but she was completely mortified. This one broke my heart. My little brother is adopted, and I've lost my crap at people who've tried to say he's not my brother. I can't imagine ever feeling or thinking that way myself. That poor girl. People like that have no place adopting. The light sticks bit is hilarious, though. I had a friend growing up whose mother was very protective. The father, not so much, but she was so bad that my parents called her Mama Hawk. I invited him to my 10th birthday party, which was at a laser tag place. His mum came, which was fine, but then while we were playing laser tag, she stood with him the whole time. Didn't play, just stayed by him. Really? What was she protecting him from? He turned out surprisingly normal and now lives 1,000+ miles away from her. I'm not sure how she deals with that. She probably thanks her lucky stars every night that he grew up a fine, well-adjusted young man living on his own, all because she boldly protected him from those deadly, deadly lasers. My friend wasn't allowed to use scissors until he was in high school. His parents were insane. You should have seen their reaction when he joined the army.
The army? Are you fricking insane? Do you want to live in constant fear? Do you want to have some psycho drill sergeant hovering over you and controlling your every fricking move?
No, Mom, that's why I'm leaving home and joining the army. I can imagine that there aren't many harsher forms of rebellion for a child of helicopter parents than leaving to an organization where you're both placed in harm's way and often completely cut off from contact. Hopefully that kid established some boundaries afterwards. Had a roommate freshman year whose mother called every day and stayed the first whole week of school. Alright. She would also randomly fly up to stay a week or two in the same bed with her daughter, accompanying her to all classes, meals, and social gatherings. The mum was afraid her daughter would not be pre-med anymore and would do anything to make sure she didn't change majors. I think what made this an extreme story was the fact that her mum flew in multiple times in one year and called every day all the way from India to the US. I work at a university. We had a parent get worried because he had not contacted her in a while and wasn't taking her calls. We tracked him down and it turned out he was just ignoring her because she called multiple times a day and was driving him crazy. I was a resident assistant in college and received a call at 3 a.m. to do a wellness check on a resident. We lived in the townhouses and it was winter, so I had to bundle up and started trudging through the snow. I'm 3/4 of the way there when I get another call canceling the wellness check. The kid's mom was worried that he wasn't answering her calls. Turns out he was asleep at 3 a.m. I was a charge nurse in a substance and alcohol rehab, and this 19-year-old kid was admitted for smack detox and treatment. His mum wanted to be there for the entire admission process, which isn't out of the ordinary for families. However, after the kid was admitted and shown to his room, his mum wouldn't leave. Detox patients would get assessments every 2 to 4 hours and were asked a series of questions to determine if they would need medication for withdrawal. His mother answered all his questions for him, and at the end of the assessment was like, "He'll take 10 milligrams of Valium for his anxiety," all while this kid lay in bed watching TV. In this particular rehab, visitors, cell phones, and laptops were allowed, so we couldn't tell her to leave until visiting hours were over. That time arrives, and you guessed it, she's still there. As the charge nurse, I had the honor of asking her to leave. Mum looked at me legitimately confused and replied, "I have to leave? I was going to stay here with my son. There are 2 beds in his room, so I didn't think it was a problem." I then explained to his mum that the second bed needed to be kept open for another potential admission. Then I was yelled at for not providing her son with a private room and that this guy in the admissions department said she could stay throughout her son's detox and treatment. I told her patients weren't allowed to have overnight guests. She was appalled because she thought that because she was the mother that she fit into some kind of loophole or something. After she left, she visited every day and stayed from the beginning of visiting hours to the end. When she wasn't there, her son was on the phone with her. Needless to say, this kid relapsed immediately after he finished treatment. In conclusion, Enabler Mother actually wanted to stay in her adult son's room while he was in rehab. Jesus, that poor kid.
If that was my mum, I'd use substances too. This makes me feel sad. She probably just wanted her son to get better. I mean, she was going about it in an insane way, but I don't even know what I would do if my son was in that situation.
Newly enrolled freshman in college, and the poor kid's mum would come to the school and walk with him through the cafeteria line, picking out what she thought he should be eating. She did this for all 3 meals. Poor guy was so embarrassed. Freshman move-in day 1, I hung out, ate, roamed around, went to a soccer game, and went home. 3 days later, my daughter calls me. "Oh my God, Mom, there are still parents here." She was horrified. I was too. My mum once got a job application for me, filled it out, signed it, submitted it, got it back, emailed them confirming that I'd take it, then she told me she'd picked up the application for me. So that. She's done far more embarrassing and helicoptery things, but I don't want anyone recognizing me, so that's all for now. I actually forgot about a worse case than this while writing. A girl that was a year below me in high school ended up going to the same community college as me. Her mum sits outside of all her classes listening in. She also makes her daughter dress the same as her and wear the same hairstyle. Her daughter is legitimately brainwashed. She doesn't have any friends because everyone is too creeped out by the situation, and her mother probably wouldn't allow it anyways. I wish I could help her somehow, but there isn't really a CPS for young adults who are brainwashed. I find it amusing that the term in English is helicopter parents. I guess it's about how they hover over you. In Sweden, we call it curling parents, as in the sport curling. It's a reference to the players with the brooms who sweep the way for the curling rock. In this analogy, the child is the curling rock and the parents are sweeping the path for them through life. We refer to the ones who remove all obstacles for their kids as snowplow parents. Usually, snowplow and helicopters are one and the same, but not always. Friends with a girl in elementary school who had parents who wouldn't let her watch PG movies at the age of 12, even with parental guidance. She wasn't allowed to come over to my house because I mentioned my favorite movie at the time to them and it wasn't G-rated. She nearly drowned at the beach a couple of years ago getting caught in a riptide, suffered permanent brain damage from a lack of oxygen. Her parents now have the forever child that they always wanted. I worked with a mother who didn't want her adult son with autism to ride the bus because she was afraid that child predators might get him. Like, lady, there are valid reasons to be concerned about your 21-year-old son riding the bus, but those guys aren't one of them. I had a father question everything about my lesson planning and teaching methods during a parent-teacher meeting. I was well prepared and I fielded his questions very well. After asking probably 50 questions, he looks around the classroom with a big smirk and says, "Sorry to ask so many questions. I'm what you call a helicopter parent." In response, I told him I was more than happy to give him weekly updates about his son, as well as spending my office hours to sit down with him to help further. His response? "Oh, I'm much too busy for that." Worst helicopter parent ever. I had a father who worked as an administrator at another school who would constantly send me emails questioning my teaching methods. His son was in my class. He was friends with my evaluating principal, so I was concerned that my job might be at risk and started responding with, "I'm not comfortable discussing this via email, but I would be happy to meet with you." Of course, he was always too busy to meet with me in person. Shortly after this, he accompanied me on a field trip, but said nothing about his concerns and didn't speak to me at all. He was on his cell phone the whole trip. The next year, he was arrested for inappropriate behavior with young teenage boys, and my evaluating principal had resigned. Yuck. I don't think this is in the same category as the other parent copters, but I should have figured that there would be at least one whose absurdity transgressed the line into straight-up creepiness. Probably an acquaintance of mine. This guy, quote, knows that his son is going to be a great NFL quarterback. The kid turned 10 recently and is a decent player, but his father has him work with different trainers and spend hours each day practicing. He takes vitamins, has a special diet, and isn't allowed to play other sports because his dad wants him to focus completely on football and doesn't want him to risk an injury playing another sport that would sideline him for football. He can't have sleepovers or do any normal kid things. I know for a fact that the kid has told his parent that he doesn't want to play anymore, but the dad doesn't care. He says that as a parent, he has to do what is best for his kid. My sons play sports too, and they don't always want to go to practice, so I understand making them stick with something they signed up for. My kids know that they have to finish out a season, but I'm perfectly fine if they don't want to sign up for the next one. I just don't understand why someone would continue to sign their kid up for something they clearly don't want to do. It's a situation that I can't see ending well, honestly. Living vicariously through your children, especially to this degree, is one of the most harmful things you can do to them. I hope this kid manages to break free. I really do. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a troop commander in the army, I had a kid who came up hot for white snow in the pea in a cup test, and then a week later was arrested by the local police department task force for being an enforcer in a local civilian military substance ring. They charged him and remanded him back to the army custody, where I immediately started the paperwork to chapter him out and let the civilian justice system take its course. The guy was 23, I think. His mum called me several times to tell me that Chris has never been in any real trouble before and he's such a sweet kid. Anytime anything happened in high school, I helped him work it out. I need to come up and talk with you and get this sorted out. I was dumbfounded. The guy was 23 years old, in the army, and his mum thinks she can come in and work it out with me. I was polite for the first call, but by the second or third phone call, I'd had enough. I told her, again, not to bother coming up to the installation, that her son wasn't a sweet kid, or else he wouldn't have beaten some guy up for not paying money he owed to a local dealer, and that the whole reason he was in this mess in the first place was because his mum had never let him be accountable for his actions. I told her that he was under my authority now, and I had no time or patience for someone who didn't take their obligation to the army, the country, or their buddies seriously enough to keep themselves out of trouble long enough to make our upcoming deployment to Iraq. When she complained that getting a dishonorable discharge would ruin his life, I informed her that fortunately I didn't have the time to waste giving him a dishonorable discharge, so he would be okay on that score. Other than honorable is what he wound up with, but the city of Harker Heights and the state of Texas might have more time than I did, so that was where she ought to focus her effort. She said I was being unfair and called my boss, which was fine by me. It blew my mind that a woman with a fully grown adult son in the army would think it was appropriate or healthy to call and talk to her son's commander about his multiple counts of misconduct and general failure to be an adult. But that, of course, is why he failed at being an adult in the first place. Teacher here. A friend of mine had a mum who came to lunch every day with her kid from kindergarten to, last I checked, 2nd grade. A little much, but the kicker is she used to spoon-feed him. This child had no issues, was completely capable of feeding himself, but she insisted on feeding him so she could monitor what he ate. A mother at a university parents' session explained how her son enjoyed reading before bed and would occasionally leave his light on. Being the considerate mother that she was, she didn't want to call to make sure he had turned his lights out, since that might wake him. She wanted to know if there was someone at the university that could check up on him every night. I love this. A lot of the others are over-the-top, blatant crazy, while this one is so wholesome and innocent, but also just so fricking unreasonable. It was me. I was 22 and had moved back from home a few months after my divorce, so I could save up enough money for an apartment. No credit, so it was $1,500 to move in. I went to visit an old friend 45 minutes away. She didn't use cell phones, so I told my mum I wouldn't be checking mine out of courtesy. But I would text when I got there and when I left. I got there, texted, and put my phone on silent. After a few hours, I got a bad feeling and checked my phone. My mum had checked the Find My Friends app, and it said I was in a drainage ditch. Funnily enough, it was right next to the restaurant we were eating at, because that app isn't always accurate, and said if I didn't call her, she'd call the police. I called her, and she had to hang up with the police to answer my call, because her adult daughter didn't answer the phone for a few hours after I'd warned her that I wouldn't. Had a really rich friend of a friend whose dad once picked him up in a helicopter. I run a huge book rental department for a good-sized university, 15,000 students. It's a beautiful program, 95% of our students' books are covered by one $85 fee. Anyway, I've seen some crazy stuff with parents. Honestly, there isn't enough space on Reddit for me to relay all the stories. My number one, however, is... It's move-in day, the worst day of the year, hundreds upon hundreds of students coming to get their books all at once. Most freshmen accompanied by their parents. This one lady marches up to the desk, pushing all other customers aside and dragging her mortified-looking son along by the hand. She then demands that I tell her how she get her son's books. I tell her the best way for your son to get his books is to use his class schedule and go find them himself, as he'll need to do this every semester moving forward. The aisles are alphabetical, and the courses arranged numerically once you find the right aisle. She tells me that she doesn't believe her son is capable of doing that. Now, at the time, I didn't expect to be staying as the manager of the department or employed by the university, so with nothing to lose, I said, "Then your son isn't capable of succeeding in college." And she lost it. Absolutely started flipping out, screaming that I called her son stupid. After her rage, I said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're the one who suggested to me that your son is incapable of using the alphabet and numbers to perform a simple matching task. I was just going off the information you provided." She stared at me. "In other words, I'm pretty sure that you're the one who just called your son stupid when you told me that he's incapable of accomplishing a kindergarten-level skill." She throws another fit and then smashes the schedule into the kid's hand. He looks like he wants to die. She points off toward the shelves and tells him that she will be here if he needs her. Then she turns and glares at me with a "we'll see" look. I wish her a nice day and go back into my office and continue to observe the chaos of move-in day. Kid found his books in 5 minutes and tried to sneak out without her noticing. Sadly, her hover skill was greater than his sneak. She spotted him headed out the door and ran after him screaming his name. I worked at IT at my college, and the number of mums I got to tee off made my day. I would literally get hundreds of calls on big registration days or the first weeks of classes asking how they log into our system to check their sons' and daughters' grades. I would have to explain, you can't. And when they demanded me to give them their sons' or daughters' passwords so they could get in or reset the password, I would explain FERPA laws to them. Seriously, they just need to let their children learn on their own. If they make a mistake, they can learn from it. Was a TA once. The best is, have you tried talking to your kids in the least snarky tone of voice you can muster? Your child is a legal adult now and has their own privacy. We can't violate it by giving away personal information. Have you tried asking your son or daughter about their grades or assignments? I mean, personally, I can't think that they would change their methods if they got as far as their children going to college without coming in on some sort of effective communication strategy, but you never know. Good on you, TA. Was in court waiting to see the judge. Another case is going on about this high school senior hitting a kid with his car on campus. His mum goes up with him and the judge started asking questions and the mum answered them. The judge politely told her he'd like to hear from the son and she agreed. The boy started to explain what happened when she immediately cut him off, told him he was telling it wrong. She begins talking again and the judge, visibly annoyed now, asks her if she was there. "No, but I know what happened," she assured him. When the judge told her multiple witnesses claim that's not what happened, she called them liars who were just out to attack her boy. She continued to argue with everything the judge said, until he finally had enough of this woman interrupting him and had her removed. Eventual friend in high school. His mother was there every day, all day. Was a private school, day student. She walked with him to class, rehearsal, music lessons, the fricking bathroom. Took the entire year to get her to stop. He ended up hiding from her. This kid was brilliant. Perfect SAT scores, accomplished musician, amazing actor. We gave him his first soda, gum, etc. Father was an ex-priest who screwed the organist. Mother was an ex-nun. Both were bat-crap crazy. We were all so proud when he went to college 800 miles away. Then it went very bad. Originally, the story was that he took his own life, which made no sense. Everything was going his way. Had full scholarship, escaped his parents, and even more amazing, a beautiful girlfriend. He redefined awkward. His mother kept insisting it was murder, that the mafia had killed him, but nobody believed her in the slightest. Fast forward a few years and a few unrelated criminal investigations, and yeah, it was the Russian mob. Apparently his girlfriend's father took a strong dislike to him when he said something unforgivable. Again, he redefined awkward, and had him killed. Well, that got dark fast. I think that's the first legitimate time I've heard someone actually get killed by the mob. I know, right? Been years and the absurdity hasn't waned. I had a mother start emailing me 10 minutes after her son left a job interview with me, then start calling for 3 days straight along with 5 or so emails a day, talking up her son and how perfect he was, and this job is a perfect fit and she would make sure he'd be there every day. Then she starts with the rules I would have to follow, such as he can't stay more than 5 minutes after 6 because she has to make dinner, and since she'd be driving him to and from every day, he mustn't be late. Then she starts asking if I could direct deposit his checks into her account so she can help him manage his money, etc. All this was going on without an inkling that I would offer him the job. She was just making these demands for him up front because this job would have to work around her schedule. Needless to say, I didn't hire him. He was a good fit too, but not with that baggage. For about a year or so, I took my daughter to an anxiety clinic to help her deal with a phobia she had developed. A certain amount of the therapy involved parents, or whoever had bought the kid, working with the child. The rest of the time, the parents hung out, waiting for their kids to finish the rest of the session, where the kids went elsewhere. One kid, Robert, had general anxiety, more or less. He had quite clearly gotten it from his mother, who was a bit of a basket case, and would do stuff like staying up all night redoing his homework so it would be done right. That poor kid. I'd arranged to play golf with a few mates when we were all around 18. One guy gets driven to the course by his mum, but rather than just being dropped off, she parked the car and decided to wait with us until it was our turn to tee off the first hole. And then she decides that she had better stay and walk with us for the entire 4+ hours of golf. A guy in the next group sees what's going on and intervenes, saying, "Hey lady, non-players are not permitted on the course, so you'd better just go home and let your son play golf with his buddies in peace." Oh, I bet that went over real well with her.
The real MVP.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.